"Who is she?" Mr. Swan shouted as Olivia approached the microphone stand, but no one heard him. The opening chords of a well-known song played, and the music drowned out his shout, "Stop, stop, stop, stop. Stop the music." He jumped up and threw his chair aside and rushed towards the stage. There was a clinking of crockery and a frightened voice behind him, but he didn't hear it. "Mr. Swan, you can't do that." The manager hurried towards him. "Don't frighten the girl." Olivia did take a couple of steps back. Who knows what that drunken man might think of? Mr. Sven caught her by the hem of her concert dress and whispered, "This can't be. I've gone mad." "Let me go," she begged. But it was as if the guest did not listen to her. He clutched the edge of her dress in his fist and tried to touch her fingers with his free hand. "Let go," she jerked, and the silver fabric snapped. Olivia heard the gathers cracking at the seam. "Mr. Sven, stop this outrage at once." The manager took him firmly by the shoulder. "Stop it, or I'll call security." And he heard nothing and saw nothing but Olivia. "Lucy, it's you, isn't it? Where are you?" He was mumbling indistinctly to himself, probably something crazy, because he looked crazy, or because now he was standing in front of the one he'd lost so miserably years ago, but had never been able to forget. Lucy. His heart suddenly pounded so hard it was hard to breathe. He tugged at his shirt, but his fingers got tangled in the knot of his tie and buttons, and then suddenly his eyes went black. He felt sick. An ambulance. Quickly, he heard someone's voice as if from far away, but it didn't matter. He was sinking into a soft, enveloping darkness and did not want to be rescued. An ambulance in a white stretcher. The shrill wail of sirens, someone's hands, and anxious voices. And he kept repeating, "Lucy, Lucy," and he thought he was screaming at the top of his voice. But the doctors only heard a low, inarticulate whisper. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, the manager was giving tea to a frightened Olivia. Come on, have some sweet tea." "Gregory, did you put sugar in the tea?" "There's sugar." The barman shrugged. "Take as much as you want." "We'll put some more." The manager slapped his palm on the counter. "Can't you see the kid's scared? And give me a biscuit and a candy." "I don't know what you've got. Get it all out. Do you got any tiramisu? Give it all to me." "Come on, Olivia." He took her hand. "Are you a better girl?" She smiled. "It's all right, Valerie Ignatievich. Don't worry about me. I just wasn't ready." "How can you prepare for something like this?" Gregory waved. "Here's your dessert. Eat it and forget about it." I don't know what the bloke's dreaming about. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was high. "Gregory, do the trick. Get out of here," hissed the landlord. "You find something to discuss with a child." He rubbed his forehead frustratedly. How many times had he berated himself for hiring a teenager? But no. Unofficially, of course, he's not stupid after all. But still, a 13-year-old girl doesn't belong in a pub. There are drunken men here, and sometimes women are no better. And their regime is not childish, as she performs from 21 to midnight. What's wrong with that? All children at this time should be in bed reading fairy tales, not singing songs in front of an almost inferior audience. But he couldn't muster up the courage to point the girl out the door either. Every time she took the microphone in her hands and started to sing, the whole audience froze. They seemed to forget to breathe. What a talent Olivia has. She had the purest voice and the depth. He'd drop everything he was doing to listen to one of her songs. "I'm sorry, honey, but just a little girl." Yes, people come here especially to listen to this little girl. But there was one more reason, the most important, which Valerie Ignatievich preferred not to speak aloud, because it was not about the attendance of their establishment, and not about the restaurant at all. The girl needed money badly. He remembered how the art director had rushed to him with his eyes wide open. "Mr. William, are you free?" "Never mind. If you're busy, let's go anyway. We've got quite a nugget of goodness here." "What nugget? What are you talking about?" "Come on, I told you." He dragged him almost by force into his office and kept muttering, "Give her a proper salary. You hear me? You can't let a girl like that go." "Here we go," thought the manager tiredly. "Can't let a girl like that go. He's trying to force strippers on us again. We're not in the right format," he said aloud. "It's never been here before, and it never will be." "Oh, wait a minute. Come on in. She's waiting." Mr. William entered the office first and was stunned to see a modestly dressed girl with neat pigtails and a face so fresh that it was immediately obvious that she was no more than 13 years old. He turned to the principal in a rage. "Are you completely out of your mind? Do you know what will happen to us with you? How could you be so stupid?" "Quiet," the art director replied nonchalantly and nodded to the little girl. Olivia, sing us something else." And that's when Mr. William realized he was lost. He'd never heard such a magical voice before. That assistant should have been punished, of course, but it was too late. He wouldn't let that songbird go for anything now. He coughed when the girl finished her song. "How old are you, child? And what's your name?" "14, she answered. "And my name is Olivia." "13. That, of course. To Anne, when I performed, she said, "I can put on a little more makeup." "Oh, please. I really need the money." He grinned. "What do you need it for?" "Dad and Mum don't want to buy." She frowned. "No, I don't have parents, no mum or dad. I'm from an orphanage. I only have a grandmother, but she's old, and they won't give me to her because of that. And now my grandmother is sick. You see, she has to have an operation, and it costs." "But how much?" Olivia looked around, as if afraid to say the amount out loud. "I see." Mr. William picked up some kind of flyer from the table. "Write it down." He handed her a pen. She quickly scribbled something on the paper and handed it back to him. When she saw the amount, Mr. William whistled. "Wow. Did you understand now?" Olivia asked hopefully. He nodded. A sudden thought crossed his mind. Why not give the girl the money? It was only 2 months' wages to him. She needed it badly. But does she really need it? Maybe he's lying. Maybe the crooks have invented a new scheme and used talented children. No, we have to wait. If the girl will run away after the first performance, then all these stories about a sick grandmother, nothing more than ordinary fiction. "Do you think I don't know what you just thought?" suddenly asked the little girl. "Do you think I'm lying?" "I don't know," he confessed honestly. "And I'm not lying," she said in a huff. "I just need money for my grandmother." "Yeah, girl. Tell me, do you realize what a restaurant is? Late at night, people come here all over the place, and they don't drink tea." So Olivia looked at him pleadingly. It was impossible to bear that look. Why should the girl have to go through all this? She was still a child, and who was to blame? If he refused her, what would she do? Try to get the money some other way. And the temptation of easy money a lot, and scoundrels who do not care about everyone but themselves, 3 times more. And there will be scoundrels who will persuade him to do something obscene. And when he wakes up, it may be too late. It's a start. Won't this talented little thing ruin herself? No, let her sing here. He'll make sure no one dares to hurt her. "I'll give you a job," Mr. William has decided. "You'll sing 4 hours a week. Plus you'll be fed dinner in the kitchen. After the show, Gregory will drive you back to your orphanage." "Do they know?" "Not yet. But I'll make arrangements," the girl promised so fiercely that there was nothing to think about. "Well, you better make a deal. You'll work then. You'll collect money till autumn." "Well, do we have a deal?" He glanced out of the window. It was frosty March outside. Olivia smiled and held out her hand to him. "Yeah, okay. You'll go to the dressing room and they'll pick out a dress for you. You can't go on stage in that." He turned to the art director again. "And if a single bastard, I repeat, a single bastard dares to offend the girl, I will fire you immediately." Olivia smiled slightly and squared her narrow shoulders. She'd already won 1 victory. When she returned to the orphanage that day, she looked into the kitchen, where Aunt Isabella was busy as usual, round and short. The cook was a favorite with children of all ages, from toddlers to teenagers. Kind, friendly, always pouring tea and giving biscuits. People came to her just to chat. And Aunt Isabella never said no. Nobody knew her exact age, not a wrinkle on her round, ruddy face. But the look in her eyes was maturely penetrating and deep. Olivia, like everyone else, loved the cheerful cook. But they shared some secrets besides liking each other. Aunt Isabella was the liaison. She lived not far from Olivia and her grandmother's house, and sometimes the girl would ask her to drop by and see if she needed help. She could only visit her grandmother once a week, and not always. The carers insisted that the grandmother should come herself, and if earlier, albeit with some effort, Granny managed to do so, now she hardly ever went out. Aunt Isabella willingly complied with Olivia's request, and in gratitude the girl helped with cleaning and washing dishes. "Aunt Isabella," she said, smiling contentedly, "I've got a job. We're going to do an operation on Grandma in the autumn." "Really?" The woman squinted incredulously. "Come on, sit down and tell me everything straight. You're not 14 years old. What kind of job is that?" "Well, it's a normal job, Aunt Isabella. I'm going to be a singer." "And where's that, I wonder?" Aunt Isabella asked. "And how about a cup of tea?" From Olivia, shouted the cook. Don't you dodge me here. Answer me, tell me where you're going to sing. But the girl took a rag and began to wipe the table. At the restaurant. It's just around the corner. It's only twice a week. And this manager. Anyway, he's a good man. He told everyone not to hurt me. And he's going to drive me home himself. The manager was all Aunt Isabella could manage to breathe out. I really, really need you to help me. Don't say no. Yeah, all right. Aunt Isabella poured the tea into cups and pulled out a tin of biscuits from somewhere in the kitchen cupboard. Oh, Olivia, what are you up to? Thought the woman. Now, if you don't want to help her, you'll have to help her. Otherwise, she'll ask someone else for help. And there's no telling how it will all end. Well, how can I help you? Asked the woman, sitting down at the table. Am I going to be your backup dancer? Olivia laughed. You let me out the back door. Twice a week, that's fine. I can climb back in through the window. It's not too high. I've tried it. Can you help me? The girl asked hopefully. Please. Don't you want to tell the carers? Maybe they'd let you go. Although what am I saying? Exactly, confirmed the girl. All right, sighed the cook. But you must promise me something. Do you want me to do the dishes after dinner? Oh, I don't want your dishes. That's not what I meant, Olivia. I want you to introduce me to the manager, who's such a nice man. I don't want to have a word with him. Okay, I'll talk to him. I'll be sure to tell him. So Mr. William agreed to the meeting at once. He was relieved when he realized that at least someone was worried about the girl, so that brave Olivia was not alone. He met Aunt Isabella himself at the door of the restaurant and escorted her into the dining room. Sit down, he said, nodding to a high stool at the counter. Gregory, give the lady a glass of wine. Dolly, I'd rather have a coffee, she said. If you say so. My name is Mr. William. And you are? I'm just Isabella, she said. I work in the kitchen at the orphanage as a cook. That's wonderful. Olivia told me about you. You're her grandmother's neighbor, aren't you? True. Well, not exactly a neighbor, but I live nearby. I visit, of course. Olivia's Aunt Nancy's grandmother doesn't know anything about this. She looked round the room. She'd rather die than let her granddaughter come here. Believe me, Isabella, Mr. William said. This is a very decent establishment. It's not for the girl, of course, but in other places, believe me, no one could guarantee her safety. Here I can personally vouch for it. You can rest easy with Olivia, he smiled. This woman was like an alien to him, a creature from another world. His gaze flicked to the marvelous hair gathered in a knot at the back of her head, a pretty face but no makeup. Her dress was old-fashioned, and her purse, which she held on her lap, obviously not knowing where to hang it. Mr. William was used to very different women, with styled hair, chiseled figures, in the most fashionable clothes. They were as beautiful and cold as jewels. But from her direct look, her voice, her intonations, for some reason the heart was covered with a warm wave. She was sincere, real, honest. Everything was in the palm of her hand. You can be sure, he said. The kids must love you, don't they? And they do, she said proudly. And I love them. That's why I went to work in an orphanage. I don't have any of my own. And now, probably I won't have any more. At least I'm happy about them. I have a daughter, said Mr. William, his voice suddenly trembling. She's 13, like Olivia. But he looked away. Looking at him now was like looking at a peeping Tom. A daughter is such a blessing, Isabella said. Happiness, he echoed. Is she studying well? Isabella asked, just to say something. I don't know. Haven't seen her in a while. Her mom and I split up when she was 2. They went somewhere in Europe. They promised to call. You know, Olivia reminds me a lot of my wife. That if I wasn't sure she was in Europe with her daughter, I think she was my daughter, and sometimes I even forget that she's not my own. Isabella was silent. What can one say? Everyone has their own bitterness, and if a man has opened the wound of his soul to you, it means that he has become unbearable. Look, but be silent and listen. Mr. William looked her straight in the eye again. Do you see now why I won't let anyone touch Olivia? Isabella nodded. Yes, I do now. Now, months later, Mr. William sat beside a pale but bravely smiling Olivia and didn't know what to do. So let me take you home, he offered, and was frightened. Well, you can't go on stage. You'll rest tonight. Don't, Mr. William, Thank you, but don't. She stood up and adjusted her concert dress. The slit at the hem was cracked, but not noticeable. I'm going to sing. And in the hospital ward, Mr. Swan lay under a drip. There was a sensor beeping quietly above his head. He didn't see it and didn't want to see it. It must be some sort of modern thing that was making sure he didn't die in here. Mr. Sven could hardly remember what had brought him here. He and his friends had been out at a restaurant. Yeah, that's right. He invited everyone there. They were celebrating a good deal. And then he suddenly felt sick. Why? Everything was fine. And suddenly, like a sharp, shining needle, a memory stabbed into his brain. A girl, almost a girl, in a long silver dress. Her long hair lying loosely on her shoulders. Lucy, his Lucy. But how? So many years had passed. Could she still be the same as she was the last time they met? And the sensor above his head beeped louder and louder. A nurse came running into the room. Mr. Swan, are you all right? No, I'm fine, he answered gruffly. I'm just lying here on a drip, getting high. Go away. She wasn't offended. If you freak out, you'll get worse. You mustn't be nervous, my dear. I didn't ask you. And I'm not your darling. You will be rude, she added just as nonchalantly and corrected the laces of the drip. Call me, you're much prettier, and you're probably handsome when you're dead. But get out of the way, he yelled. I'll talk to the doctor about you later. Who the hell are they hiring? The girl calmly spun the wheel of the drip, adjusted his blanket, and slowly walked out. Bollocks, he muttered, not knowing who he was angry with. Himself for being insolent, the nurse for not being afraid of his force, anger, or maybe his stupid helplessness. He's lying there, and he can't even move. Lucy had always made him helpless, always, but he realized it only now. It wouldn't seem the other way around. Mr. Sven closed his eyes, and for the first time in 15 years allowed himself to remember everything from the beginning. It even seemed to him that the tart scent of spring was in the air again, and he was 22 again, and it's that special magical time. He has been sitting on the bench at the entrance since 19 and does not let his guitar out of his hands. Of course, he doesn't play very well, but a guy with a guitar is always attractive, isn't it? Neighborhood girls surround him, and they don't know, silly girls, that he is not interested in them in the slightest. He's got his own first love that nobody knows about, and she doesn't seem to care. Lucy doesn't get home until 9. He knows that she works in an office for some rich man, and in the evening she goes to a tutor, learns languages, wants to become a translator and leave here one day. And he doesn't want to leave, but he'd do anything for Lucy. She doesn't even notice him, and she walks past him, doesn't even turn her head. And then he can't even exhale properly. So slender with a straight back, swift as an arrow. It seems like she could take off like that. Strict business suit, neat hair. As he fell asleep, he played a fascinating game with himself, imagining Lucy in a sundress with loose hair. Here she was walking through a chamomile field, the grass crumpled softly under her bare feet. Her hair smells of chamomile, golden in the sunlight. And Lucy is laughing greedily, lustily, beckoning him to follow her. And he follows her forever, enchanted by that laughter. And she kisses him the same way she laughs, lustfully, greedily. One day he dares to dare, he calls out to her. She turned her head and stopped, as if she had noticed him for the first time, as if he didn't hang around here every night. But how do you do, though? Do I know you? We've known each other for years, he blurted out. It doesn't matter what rubbish you say. The important thing is she's not leaving. She's standing there listening to him. In a previous life your name was Esmeralda, and mine was Quasimodo. You see? Start remembering. She smiled politely. And in this life, what is your name? My name is Eugene. You mean Sven? No, Eugene. It's more interesting. Nice to meet you, Eugene. She took a step towards the door. He'll be gone. He panicked and jumped off the bench. Listen, Lucy, do you want to go up on the roof? We'll have some champagne, and I'll tell you all about our old lives. There's a lot to remember. Champagne on you, of course, she stated. On me, he replied hastily. Everything is on me. And the roof, and the champagne, and whatever you want. How sweet that spring romance had been. He climbed the roofs like a wildcat, looking for a prettier view for her, and spent almost half his salary on the best champagne also for Lucy. He even wrote songs and dedicated every single one of them to her. Lucy laughed and said he should be a troubadour, for one could not say that he was a serious man, a geologist. He paid no attention to her affectionate jokes. Tell me, why do you need your foreign country? This question did not give him rest. We could be perfectly comfortable here. You learn languages, you could do some tutoring. Everyone's obsessed with English these days. But what a blessing. With school children, she'd wince. It doesn't have to be school children. Don't adults learn languages? You do. Lucy threw her long legs over his lap and frowned her pretty little nose. Adults rarely learn. I'm the exception. All right. He ran his palm along her narrow ankle to her knee and back again. How smooth her skin is. Like silk. If you don't want a tutor, don't. There are other options. Like what? Like being a translator. You get a foreign book and translate it. That way you can earn good money while on maternity leave. Plus my salary. We could live like human beings. Don't tell me about the maternity leave. Why not? She'd immediately jump up and start pacing the room nervously. Don't you understand? I've invested so much time and effort into my future. I've been studying since high school while everyone was on holiday. I've studied every subject. I've entered every competition, every Olympiad. I tried my best to get a gold medal. How do you think it was easy to get in? I worked my arse off. And then to stay in that damn safe, all prestigious faculty. Well done, he remarked, keeping his eyes on her slim, light figure. You're persistent, my hard worker. Do you think I like it? Why do you work there? For the prospect, Lucy said her words, enunciating each syllable. I'm learning languages too, so that I can have a good life in the future. And you're talking rubbish about maternity leave. A milk kitchen plus 20 kilos of weight. And what kind of life is there? A shop, a house, a playground. That's not what I'm here for. Okay? Don't go on. He put his arms around her, pulled her to him, and kissed her for a long, long time, until Lucy was tender, affectionate again. Would he ever be able to talk her into it? Someday could he? Time ceased to exist. He lived as if unconscious from one meeting to the next. And nothing, absolutely nothing around him mattered except her voice, the scent of her hair and her cool skin. Do you love me? Do you love me? Thelma insisted. But she never answered. Only once, coldly, stiffly looking him straight in the eye, she said, Never will any love ruin my life. What are you talking about? He was confused, and only then, much later, did he realize it was goodbye. Lucy loved him. She must have loved him. But she was preparing herself for parting, because she could not do otherwise. And she had said many times that there was nothing more important to her than the future she dreamed of. And she'd said it, and he, the idiot, had never been able to hear her, to believe that she wasn't joking. Lucy studied to exhaustion at school to become a gold medalist, got a job with a rich boss. She studied languages in the evenings, all to fulfill her dream of living in some European country, where nothing unusual ever happens, and one can live a contented, unhurried life and feel safe. And what could a young fool in love with a guitar give her? Pregnancy, a hastily arranged marriage, and then heartburn, oedema, a figure ruined by childbirth and sleepless nights with the baby. A depressing life where you have to scramble to save every cent. And then there were the colds, the baby sicknesses, the parent-teacher conferences. She realized this and didn't want to give up on her dream. That's what she wanted to say then. The man thought tiredly. She wanted to say that she loved me, but even for love, she would not give up her plans. After that very meeting, he never saw her again. Her mom had only thrown up her hands at all his desperate inquiries. She'd gone away, she said, and she wouldn't say where she'd gone. Will she come back? Who knows? Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. She'll come back. He kept telling himself not to go crazy. She can't be without me. She'll come back. He just had to wait. And he waited. He waited for her. Every day he ran from work, hoping that Lucy would come back and ring the doorbell of his rented flat. As was his habit, he bought champagne, sat for hours at the window, so as not to miss the moment when she would walk down the road, leading to the entrance, with her heels clicking businesslike, clearly. This senseless waiting was tiring him, draining him of all his juices. And at some point he must have been too tired to wait. It was late autumn. On the last Friday in November he came home from work and was going to sit by the window with a plate as usual. But suddenly he realized that he didn't want to. He didn't want anything at all, only to sleep. Suddenly it seemed to him that he hadn't slept for a good 100 years, maybe even more. He'd fallen into bed on Friday and woke up only on Sunday morning. And that was it. He felt free and empty, as if he didn't care about anything at all. Lucy was gone and she was never coming back. He'd never see her again, which meant he just had to live. Just live. That wasn't really a bad idea. All I wanted to know was how to make it happen. After all, not so long ago the world around her had been filled with music, bright colors, smells, and now it was suddenly extinguished. Without her, the world was extinguished and silent. Gone were the expectations and the outmoded hope. It was like removing a nerve in a tooth. The tooth was there, but it had no sensitivity. For the first few days he had lived like an automaton. He got up in the morning because his alarm clock went off. He ate breakfast because his body needed to keep up his strength. He went to work because he had to go, and because work gave his phantom life some meaning. To land, and then somehow he felt better. A comrade called him to go with him on an expedition somewhere in the wilderness to look for oil, and that was exactly what he needed. A complete change of scenery, I think that's what it's called. Hard work, new tasks, and healthy fatigue cured him. And he remembered well how one day, sitting by the fire, he suddenly felt happy all of a sudden. It smelled like spruce cones. He had been fed. The fire was warm, and he knew exactly what he would do tomorrow and how important his work was to others. And in a couple of weeks, the New Year's holiday would come. This happy and nightmarish year would end. The hands of the clock would move into the future, and a new page would open. Through a will, won't it? Of course it will. How could it not? He never knew whether he had forgotten Lucy, fallen out of love with her, or simply accepted the fact that she had left him, and he preferred not to think about it. What was gone. And then there was that night at the restaurant, and Lucy, untouched by time. Bollocks. It's rubbish. But then who did he see there? He fumbled for the nurse's call button. She appeared a minute later. "I'm listening, Mr. Swan. How long do I have to lie here? Is there a job waiting for me when I'm discharged?" he asked hoarsely. The nurse was still as calm as ever. "That's a matter you'd better discuss with the doctor, Mr. Swan, but I think it'll be soon enough." "All right, give me the phone. I need to know what's going on in the world without me," he said. "I'm afraid that's out of the question," replied the nurse. "Why not?" "Your doctor's orders." She smiled charmingly and explained, reading the news, business negotiations. All these things can cause strong emotions, and they are for you right now. She looked expressively at the blinking sensor above the patient's head. All of these things are contraindicated. He really wanted to throw something at the health fairy. But as luck would have it, there was nothing heavy at hand. The days of August were hot, as if summer had decided to release all the heat it had left. On such warm summer evenings, all the windows in the orphanage were open wide, and from the street quietly and peacefully came the conversations of carers. It is still good that we were given this recreation center as a summer cottage. Do you agree? It is good and children on the nature to be, and we at least a little relax, thanks to the new mayor. It's nice, Tony, of course it is, but you've been there. I went back in the winter after the gift with the director to see what's going on, and let me tell you, it's abandoned. The work there is too much to count. So we were also allocated a team of repairmen. So they only cleaned up the buildings and around. In the past, at least the kids could be organized for socially useful work, but now it's called exploitation of child labor. Oh, you can't understand what's going on. 2 13-year-old girls sat in their room and listened to the conversation with curiosity. When they heard the last sentence, they exchanged understanding glances and giggled softly. "Oh, Alex, it's not like that for me," whispered Linda. "They gave me the cottage bad. They renovated it, and again." Olivia looked at her watch and put her finger to her lips. "You're getting ready already." Linda raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You start early, you finish early," Olivia replied. Olivia tiptoed to the door and looked out into the corridor. Actually, weekend evenings are a quiet time, especially in the summer. Now that some of the children have been taken away to a large holiday center converted into a children's cottage, it's quieter in and around the building. Time itself even seems to slow down. There is no frantic waterfall. It is replaced by a smooth honey current. The carers, after dinner, pull out chairs and a small tea table on the porch and sit, some with a phone, some with a book, and some will want to chat. They stroll back and forth along the flower beds, or they go to the gazebo, so as not to disturb others in the peaceful, relaxed time. Olivia slipped silently out the door and moved toward the dining room. There was no one there, of course, only the quiet splash of water coming from the kitchen. "Aunt Isabella," the girl called out in a loud whisper. The cook turned round. Her face was round and flushed from the heat, and she smiled. She quickly wiped her hands with a towel and walked over to Olivia. "Is it time to go?" "And so, Aunt Isabella, have you been to see your grandmother?" The cook sighed, inviting a frustrated Olivia into the kitchen. I did. I went to see her. What can I say? It's bad. She needs surgery. We'll do it, said the girl with confidence. Aunt Isabella, I've already saved a lot. I'll work for another month, and then I'll be sure. Tears came to the woman's eyes. Every time I let you go, my heart sinks. What if someone hurts you? I'm scared for you, Olivia. Don't be afraid, Olivia's advice. Who's going to hurt me? I'll hurt anyone I want to. And you know Mr. William, don't you? What did he promise you? Don't worry about it. But come on, let's go. She went to the back door and looked out first. It looks empty. Well, go with God. Olivia jumped out and hurried to the iron fence. Climbing over it wasn't a problem with the right skills. The important thing was not to get caught. But so far she'd been lucky. The cook, looking after Olivia, crossed her broadly. She couldn't wait until autumn. The girl would earn the money she needed and then forget about this restaurant. Although Mr. William was a decent man and kept his word, he took care of the little singer as if she were his own and did not allow anyone to even look at her in an opti. Still, what was a child to do in a nightclub? Isabella pulled out her phone and quickly dialed a message. William, she's on her way, and, blushing slightly with embarrassment, added a heart. She hadn't told anyone yet, but after their first meeting, Mr. William rang again and invited Isabella to have dinner together. Since then, they'd started seeing each other. And lately, he started talking about getting married. What about it? Isabella asked fearfully. I'm not your equal. I'm just a simple woman, a cook in an orphanage, and you. What about me? He said, putting his finger gently to her lips. I want to be your husband because you are sincere, kind, real, and it remains to be seen who is not equal to whom. The ring he gave her. Isabella did not wear to work, but always carried in her purse, and if she had a spare moment, she took it out to iron it. Don't worry, Olivia's here. Love you, she read the message. That's how it goes. Love. And who would have thought that such a sophisticated, intelligent, and caring man could fall in love with an ordinary, unremarkable woman? Isabella remembered how she had laughed when, some 20 years ago, a gypsy woman had foretold her just such a husband. She will meet him in a noisy place, she had said. He will love you with all his heart. Just don't push him away. Have faith and all will be well. It seemed to Isabella then that it was all nonsense. But now, lo and behold, it had come true. Mr. Swan looked at himself gloomily in the mirror. He was a good-looking man after a month in a hospital bed. He was thin, pale as paper, with circles under his eyes that made it hard to tell whether he hadn't slept for a month or whether someone had given him a bruise. And even his hair was thinning. He ran his fingers over his head. I should go to the barber. He grinned, remembering how he'd never been able to get a barber in his youth. He had shoulder-length hair back then. He was proud of it. Girls liked it and envied him. Of course they did. His hair was just right, thick, wheat-colored, and his hair curled in big ringlets. Back then, he'd only seen barbershops and scissors in his nightmares. Now it's once a month, like clockwork. That's when he got his first haircut. After Lucy's New Year's Eve, he handed his mate a machine and told him to cut it short. Ben, shave it all off. I've had enough of this shaggy hair. My head will freeze without them, laughed. But Mr. Swan did not back down. Shave off, I'm starting a new life. His mate was not to be stubborn. And the strange thing was, as the luxurious curls fell to the floor, the feeling of real freedom from the past came more and more fully. Should I shave my head again? But I shouldn't. I'm a respectable man now, they'll misunderstand me. But I should definitely see a hairdresser. But not today, he thought. He had other things to do today. He adjusted his tie, took his car keys and left the house. It was still safe to park outside the restaurant at this hour. So far, those who have a working day tomorrow, which means only dinner and a small amount of alcohol, have come here to sit down. It's after midnight when the crowd piles in and the drunken revelry begins. Hello, Mr. Swan. The manager nodded to him. Hello, William. We need to talk. Yes, Mr. Swan sighed. Mr. Swan was no longer an openly reckless boy, and he was no longer used to apologies. I caused trouble the last time I was here. I'm sorry about that. Don't be. It's all right. No, look. I don't know what came over me. They took me away in an ambulance and kept me in hospital for a month. They said it was a massive heart attack. And you know what it is. I loved a girl once. I loved her so much that she left me. You see, it was so long ago, years and years, and when I saw that singer of yours, I couldn't believe it. Who is she? She, Mr. William said coldly. Well, that girl, William. I almost lost my mind. How could it be that it was the same one? And what's more, she hasn't changed a bit. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I need to see her and I want to talk to her, so help me. Mr. William said, Mr. Swan, you probably don't know this, but our singer is just a child. We've given her a job due to extraordinary circumstances. The makeup makes her look grown up, but in fact she's only. In short, there's no way she could be the girl you're talking about. What if it's her daughter? The man persisted, or her younger sister. We don't know anything about the girl's parents, Mr. William replied irritably. She lives and is brought up in an orphanage. As for the resemblance, well, there are many things in nature. Olivia reminds me of someone too, but that's no reason to think that I'm sorry. Oh, wait a minute, William. Mr. Swan caught the manager by the sleeve. I understand that, but I need to see her. I must. No, I'm not crazy. I almost died in that hospital. Now I think I'm alive, but I don't know whether to go on living like I used to or go to a mental institution. So let me just talk to her. I swear I won't lay a finger on her. Do you want us to talk in front of you? William, please. Mr. William shook his head. I feel sorry for the man. I guess he really doesn't know what's wrong with his head anymore. I'll invite Olivia into the hall. You will speak here in my presence. Now, you sit down. I'll get the girl. Mr. Swan obediently sat down at the nearest table. When the manager and Olivia appeared in the room, his heart began to tap again. I'm going to die here, he thought wistfully. I'm going to die here. Mr. William came closer and pulled out a chair for Olivia. Sit down, Mr. Swan. I just wanted to have a chat with you. And now we're going to find out exactly what it's about. The girl sat down and looked questioningly at the stranger. Not a shadow of the fear that might have remained after their first meeting. How like Lucy she looked ran through his head again. The same face. He began, coughing. First of all, I want to apologize for what I did last time. I wasn't myself then. I was sick. I'm sorry. Accepted. Olivia smiled. How are you feeling now? Not bad. Thank you. I wanted to know this. You remind me very, very much of an old friend of mine. Too much, in fact. So I thought you might be related. Tell me, do you know anything about your parents, your mother, your father? They were divorced a long time ago, shrugged her shoulders. I don't remember my dad, and I don't know his name. My grandmother changed all my documents. When I was left behind, she even gave me her own surname and changed my middle name. I see. And your mum? Do you remember her? My mum? My mum left me to my grandma. I don't know where she is. Grandma said she was in England, I think, but nobody knows for sure. The man looked at Olivia. What's her name? Mr. Swan asked. Your mum? Lucy, Mrs. Lucy Wilson. And you, William? William, what's the matter with you? Mr. William cradled his face in his hands. Is your grandmother's name Anne? He asked in a muffled voice. Mrs. Ann Smith. That's my grandmother. Why? What is it, Mr. William? He took his hands away from his face and his eyes were red, inflamed. Nothing, he said, just you and my daughter. Grandma didn't tell you, I guess, but she changed your name too. I used to call you Bridget. He was quiet for a long time. Lucy and I separated 15 years ago, said Mr. Swan. How old are you? 13? This has nothing to do with you, Mr. William said tiredly. To Lucy, my wife told me that she had recently ended a tort affair. She even rented a flat in another part of the city so that she wouldn't cross paths with you, even by chance. I guess she thought I was more promising. I was already in the restaurant business, and she kept asking me to go to Europe to open a restaurant there. She was obsessed with Europe. I agree, Mr. Swan said. She must have seen too many films. It's ridiculous. It's like people don't live here. Yes, it is. She kept talking me into it. I didn't agree, but she insisted. In the end, we decided to go to England just for a holiday, just to look around. I hoped Lucy would realize that things were not as easy as they seemed. And then the three of us came back from that trip when we found out we were pregnant. Lucy seemed so happy. It was only later that I realized she was just hoping the baby would help her push me harder. And then Bridget was born. My wife began to tell me daily that now our daughter would have to grow up in unpredictability, that here we have in a year in advance nothing cannot be predicted, and that if I were a responsible person I would have moved the family to Europe long ago, where we could live and raise our children in peace. What familiar speeches, Mr. Swan chuckled. Peace of mind, prosperity, stability, foresight. So we also started to quarrel all the time. Mr. William nodded. I was so tired of it that I would have devoted. I came home from work one day and found no one there. No wife, no bridge, no belongings. I had just a note on the table saying they were leaving for good. I rushed to call my mother-in-law, but she told me all the same things, that Lucy and Bridget had gone away, and not to call her again. But I don't know what my wife had said to her about me, but it wasn't good. My grandmother told me that Mom came to see her and said she had to go away on business, and she never came back. Olivia continued. Grandma went to the police, too. They asked everywhere. And it turned out that Mom had the travel documents ready for a long time, but only for her. She didn't want to take me with her, Olivia said sadly. My grandmother must have decided that no one needed me. That's why she changed my papers. She wanted to get guardianship, but they wouldn't let her. They said she's old. She can't raise a child on her own. So now I'm saving up for the operation. You don't have to, my daughter, Mr. Williams said firmly. We're going to go into Grandma's today and tell her to get ready for the operation. I'll pay for everything, Mr. Swan said thoughtfully. I think I'll look for a good surgeon. It's a shame for Granny. Even though she brought up a daughter like that, it's still a shame. His torment for understanding dissolved. There were no more riddles. There were no more questions to which he did not know the answers, and Lucy's image, which had recently been so vivid, suddenly faded and began to blur. Well, he said, standing up, I'm glad it's all cleared up. And again, my apologies. And about the doctors, I'll get back to you the other day, William. Now I have to go. I think you two have enough to talk about without me. And he went out into the street, feeling healthier and more energized than ever. Oh, how things had turned out, and he thought he'd gone mad, thrown a tantrum in a decent place, frightened a girl, and nearly died himself. But in the end, it was thanks to him that father and daughter found each other, and Mrs. Ann Smith will live. God bless her, the old woman, he thought. He didn't like her. He thought she was hiding Lucy from him on purpose, and Lucy always made up her own mind about everything. And then she decided that she would leave the people closest to her. Oh, Lucy, Lucy. But are you happy now? You've reached your Europe. Now sit down. 2 months later, Mr. William, Isabella, and Olivia met their grandmother, Mrs. Ann Smith, from the hospital. Isabella was holding a large bouquet of flowers, and Mr. William was talking to the doctor. The little girl stood beside him, holding her daddy's hand. Everything went well, said the doctor. Mrs. Ann Smith has a very strong constitution for her age, so there's every reason to think that her recovery will go smoothly. Of course, she will need careful care at first, but don't let her be lazy. Moderate exercise is a must, and don't let her feel sorry for herself. People Mrs. Ann Smith's age are often afraid to make a single movement after the operation. Mr. William nodded and turned to his daughter and fiancée. I think it would be best if Granny stayed with us for the time being. We'll give her a room, make it fit her needs. No, Dad, Olivia shook her head. She'd be better off at home. I'll stay with her for a while. I'll help, Olivia said. No, Bridget, Dad objected. We'll get a good care for Grandma, and we'll come and see her every day. You need to study with a vocal coach. He gave his daughter a big hug. I've lived too long without you. I don't want to be apart anymore. Yes, my daughter, Isabella added. Grandma needs help from a specialist, someone with a medical degree, and we can always visit her. She smiled slyly. After all, I'm going to need your help soon when the baby. The girl gasped enthusiastically. A baby? And you were silent. We weren't sure ourselves until this morning, Mr. William explained. But now you know. Soon you'll have a little brother or sister. And there's no way we can do without your help. And when Grandma gets better, she can move in with us if she wants to. 10 years later, Olivia won an international singing competition. Grandma, Daddy, Isabella, and the twins sat in the front row with flowers and quietly melted with pride as they listened to the cheers in the audience. And somewhere in England, in a quiet country pub, sat a very thin woman with uncombed straw hair. The regulars knew that Julia was no more than 45 to 46 years old. But she looked like a real old woman. Wrinkles had prematurely furrowed her once beautiful face, and her gaze was heavy with disappointment. Julia lived a secluded life on the outskirts of the countryside and had no friendships with anyone, speaking to people only out of necessity. It was said that she had long ago moved to England from Russia, wanted to get a job in London, But there were some difficulties, not with the work or with the documents. For a few years she survived on casual earnings, and then she realized that London was not for her. Here, in a quiet village, it is easier to live, and the prices are not so. What did this lonely, frowning woman live on? Who did she leave behind in her distant Russia? Why did she decide to move at all? No one knew and no one sought to find out. The television on the wall was muttering something quietly, without attracting anyone's attention. Julia stared at the screen. "What's that program?" she asked loudly. "A talent contest," someone lazily answered her. The woman turned to the screen again and froze, looking at a young singer from Russia. Olivia, the commentator, explained in a high-pitched voice. A girl with an amazing fate. She grew up in an orphanage, and only thanks to a happy coincidence she was able to find her father, and the family was reunited. So this girl's extraordinary talent combined with her fantastic luck helped her to win the most difficult competition, and now a brilliant future awaited her. Olivia's radiant face appeared on the screen. Julia froze, gritting her teeth tightly. It was unbearable to look at that girl, at her younger self, the unwanted child she was so relieved to be rid of when she left her homeland. And look at her. She's got everything, a loving family, even managed to find her daddy somehow, and a grandmother, of course. She's got fame, a bright future. Julia stood up and walked quickly out of the pub, trying to keep her posture for some reason. It seemed to her that everyone there was looking at her, the cuckoo mother, and judging and despising her. It shouldn't be, she told herself over and over again. It's me, I've worked so hard, so cunning, to achieve my goal. And instead I'm sitting in a backwater among some idiot farmers. And I should be living in London and shining, yes shining, surrounded by luxury and with the most gorgeous men. I should be the one with the glittering future, not her. Only life has deceived me. Mrs. Lucy Wilson shoved her hands deep into the pockets of her cloak and quickened her stride. As she stepped out of the shower, Vivian heard the voices of her husband and mother-in-law in an unfamiliar language, barely understanding the. Vivian Smith stood next to the high panoramic window and looked thoughtfully into the distance, where in the depths of her and her husband's large and blooming garden was a beautiful little lake, in which huge rainbow carp were slowly swimming. "Here, Vivi, look how beautiful they are," Stephen said, hugging her. "They were bought especially for you, so that you could come here at any time and watch our family in miniature." Stephen smiled and pointed to a pair of beautiful fish moving smoothly beneath the glass like water column. "Look, the bigger one is kind of like me," he continued. "And this beauty with shimmering sides, this is you, Vivian, my female, my lawful wife. See how happy they are, just like you and me. It's not for nothing that we have a name that speaks Smith." Vivi looked at the majestic fish for a long time and thought that now she too was swimming in the middle of the unknown of her own life. And just like these carp, she could not remember herself. The woman slowly shifted her gaze to her reflection in the window. She was tall, almost model height, slender like the trunk of a birch tree. Vivian had a truly beautiful appearance. The platinum blonde, who had turned 25 last year, looked as if she had stepped straight from the pages of a fashion magazine. However, Stephen said that's how they met. Mole, she was a model, about to finally leave the business, and he a successful banker, whose management was several branches of one of the largest banks in the country. Her husband told her that they had met at some art exhibition, either devoted to Impressionism or vice versa. It was something related to handicrafts. Stephen said he couldn't remember exactly anymore. "I wish I could remember any of it," Vivi thought to herself bitterly. Anything at all. However, no matter how much the businessman's wife strained her memory, no matter how much she tried to reconstruct the events of that fateful day, when she was in a terrible car accident and almost completely lost her memory, she could not remember anything but her name. Her first memory, after she finally regained consciousness, was a long road home. The woman remembered the cozy interior of an expensive car in which her husband drove her to their luxurious country mansion, which stood in one of the most closed and carefully guarded cottage villages. Next to her in the car sat a middle-aged woman, dressed in a chic three-piece suit of sky blue color. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup would be the envy of the Queen of England. The lady looked to be about 50, but she had a figure like Hollywood stars, trim, slim, with a minimum of wrinkles on a beautiful, but a little cold face. It was later revealed that this was Stephen's mother, Cindy Smith. The banker's mother owned a large spa complex, so in matters of youth and beauty she really had no equal, at least in their town. Already after they arrived home, Stephen and Cindy told her in more detail about what had happened to her. "Honey, it's normal for you to feel a little lost," her husband explained to her. "That accident you were in with your driver was just horrible. The driver was killed on the spot. And you..." Stephen hesitated, as if it was hard for him to talk about it. And he did not know how to choose the right words not to shock his already confused wife. "Vivi, you were literally in pieces. Your brain was severely damaged, and after the doctors conducted several complex operations, you had to be put into an induced coma. You wouldn't have survived otherwise." "Dear Mayor." Cindy, who was sitting there, lowered her eyes silently and put her palm to her forehead, as if she were suddenly sick with worry for her sister-in-law. "You've been in a coma for almost 6 months," she said quietly. "My son visited you every day, hoping that your condition would finally improve enough to wake you up. But the doctors didn't give a positive prognosis at first. They said that the chances of your recovery were slim to none. You did it, Vivi. You beat death. You did it." When Cindy looked at Vivi again, there were tears in her eyes. She immediately walked over to her sister-in-law and gave her a sincere hug. Vivi had no choice but to reciprocate the gesture with a much smaller hug of her own. "I've been waiting for you," Vivi said, Stephen, wiping tears from the corners of his eyes. "You don't know how long I've waited. Mom is right. Even the doctors were desperate, but I still believed. I believed you'd come back to me. Sweetheart, thank God you did. You're home now. And I'll never let you suffer again. Never again." The young woman looked at her husband, and for a tiny moment it seemed to her that she had heard something like that before. But it had been under completely different circumstances, and what they were, she did not remember. Vivi felt as if she'd been asleep for decades, and when she woke up, she found herself in a completely different time and place than where she had fallen asleep. The woman was haunted by a constant feeling of lethargy and physical weakness, and everything around her seemed completely different from what it was supposed to be. Thank you both," Vivi replied slowly, and her mother-in-law finally released her from her overly strong arms. The young woman smiled weakly at her and her husband, and added, "I must be very lucky to have such a sensitive and caring family. I will try to remember you and everything that happened before this terrible accident. I promise." Cindy and Stephen gave a quick glance. But in the next second, a happy smile flashed across the faces of her husband and mother-in-law. "Of course, darling," Cindy sang out, taking her hand. "We don't doubt it. Stevie will help you fill in all those gaps in your memory after the coma. We've done a little bit of preparation for this, to be honest. So as soon as you're fully ready to get started, just let us know. Okay?" And Vivi nodded and asked abruptly, "Are you living with us?" Her mother-in-law was stunned for a moment, as if she hadn't expected her daughter-in-law to be so tactless. But then, realizing that it was just an ordinary question, Cindy softened. "That's right, honey. Me, you, and Stevie all live together in this lovely house. I'll keep an eye on you, if you don't mind," she said, looking at her sister-in-law carefully. "Stephen is at work all day long. Besides, he's often sent on business trips, even abroad. I think it's for the best." Vivi shifted her questioning gaze from her to her husband, and he confirmed her mother's words. "Darling, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. I'm taking a little vacation now, but I'll have to go back to the office in a couple of weeks. I want to be absolutely sure that nothing will happen to you while I am away. My mom has graciously agreed to help me with that, even though she too has more than enough worries in her complex. I'm sure you and Mom will have a great time together. You two were thick as thieves before the accident. We're real girlfriends." Stephen laughed a low, clean laugh, looking at his mother for support. It wasn't long before Cindy laughed too. "Of course we'll talk about so many things, cook so many delicious meals. You won't be bored, that's for sure," her mother-in-law patted Vivi's hand gently. But Vivi felt that the woman did it a little too playfully, as if she were exaggerating their friendship. The husband had obviously embellished the true state of affairs between Cindy and her sister-in-law. Anyway, Vivi didn't say anything at that time, but only gave her loved ones another weak smile. She was indeed very tired, and the only thing she truly wanted badly at that moment was to just sleep. Her relatives didn't resist Vivi's wish and took her to the room designated for her. Nearly a year had passed since then, but the young woman had made no progress in her many attempts to remember her life before the accident. It was as if someone had deliberately separated the two halves with an invisible line, and everything that had gone before was irretrievably lost. Her husband helped her as much as he could, showing her the wedding album, which contained a lot of photos of the celebration itself and afterwards from their daily life. Here they are, happy and insanely beautiful, posing for a photo surrounded by 24 of Vivi's friends. A gorgeous designer dress the color of melted milk, fully embroidered with silk and silver crystals, which are folded into a whimsical and slightly reminiscent of Scandinavian ornaments. "You look so beautiful here." Kissing his wife, Stephen whispered. Vivi only smiled softly. She was not yet ready to get as close to her husband as he would have liked. Too little time had passed, and she had not yet had time to get used to him or to feel the feelings that had bound them together, as he claimed, for 3 long years. "I'm sorry," Vivi said softly. But it was as if her husband didn't hear it, as he continued to try to communicate with her more closely. He tried to hug her, but the woman pulled away more insistently. "No, Stevie, please, I can't." "But I love you," Stephen answered her sadly. Vivi realized from his face that he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Now all he could do was look disappointedly back at their wedding photos. "Okay," he said dryly. "But did you remember anything? You can't hide from me forever. After all, I am your husband. You don't need to be afraid of me. Maybe if we started living together again like we used to, you would sooner be able to not only remember, but also feel the same love for me that I feel for you every day." Vivian felt very heavy at heart. She desperately wanted all those beautiful, sublime feelings Stephen had spoken of to come back to her memory. But as she looked at the multicolored pictures, she felt absolutely nothing. Of Vivek, not even the slightest glimmer of memory. Vivi was terribly embarrassed, so she could only shake her head negatively. "That's what I thought," his husband said in a much colder tone. "Vivi, sometimes I think you don't even try to remember things. I know it's hard for you, but you could just try to trust me and Mom. If your memory still won't come back to you. Look at your right hand." Vivian obediently stared at her right hand, where on the ring finger was a wedding ring with a huge pink diamond. Stephen intercepted her gaze and nodded briefly. "See, that's the ring I gave you the day I proposed. You were so happy to receive it. So happy that you said yes to me right away." "Stephen." Vivi tried to defend herself, but her husband gestured for her to shut up. "Please let me finish," he said, and a mournful expression spread over his face. "You don't remember now, but you and I have always been part of the same whole. We loved each other so much that we even made special vows to each other for our wedding." Stephen rummaged through his wife's bathroom cabinet and pulled out a large envelope. Inside was a sheet of coated paper, neatly folded in half. On the sheet was a typewritten love letter in which Vivian poured out her feelings to her future husband. "Here, read it carefully," she asked her husband. "If it doesn't awaken in you even a little memory of how happy we were, then I beg you to know. I'm begging you, Vivi. Just take my word for it. I love you. I love you more than anything in the world, and I always will." With these words, the man left his wife's room, leaving her alone with her wedding vows and her own far from rosy thoughts. Vivian read the message to her husband and cried. Crying because she could not remember how she had written it, nor what she had felt while doing so. The vow was truly beautiful, so pure, so sincere. "God, why? I don't remember any of this," she asked herself, and God the same question. Why couldn't she love her husband again and remember him? Cindy's mother-in-law's advice didn't help either, even though they cooked together in the expansive kitchen and traveled into town together to walk the places that Vivian loved most, as Cindy assured her Vivian did. It was all to no avail. It was as if there was a huge stone wall inside Vivian that prevented her from looking into the depths of her own memory and remembering everything. At the same time, Vivian was never left alone for a minute. She was always with her mother-in-law or Stephen himself. She and her husband went out into the city a couple of times a week. There they went shopping, to restaurants. Or Stephen tried to spend time with his wife, visiting theaters, movies, and exhibitions. Vivi was very grateful to her husband for his care, but did not understand why she could not do all the same, but on her own, without his presence. The woman wanted some freedom, some personal space. She hoped unsuccessfully that if she could be alone with her thoughts, her memory might come back to her much faster. "No, sweetheart, that's not possible," Stephen told her over and over again. "You're too weak to control yourself completely. What if you get dizzy? Or, God forbid, you'll lose consciousness and fall back into a coma? Vivi, darling, I wouldn't survive that. But I'll have to go out on my own someday. You can't lock me up in our house forever." At the thought of that, Vivi immediately shuddered. She suddenly realized that she couldn't stand closed spaces and loneliness. Stephen, seeing his wife's reaction to his words, instantly became nervous with excitement. The corner of his eye even twitched. "What is it, Vivi? Did you remember something?" he asked strangely. "No," she answered. "Why do you ask?" Her husband relaxed visibly at once and spoke more softly. "It seemed to me as if you felt something new. Maybe you remembered that you and I had argued like this before." Vivian shook her head negatively. "Not really, but you're right. I realized I couldn't be alone for too long." Something inside the woman seemed to push her, and she looked at her husband carefully. "Stephen, why haven't any of my friends called me in all this time? Don't I have any friends? The phone you gave me doesn't have anyone in my contact list except you and Cindy. What about my parents? Where are they, Stephen?" There were so many questions that Stephen involuntarily started pacing around the room where they were talking. It was one of those evenings when they were about to go to the premiere of the Capitol's play, which was on tour in their city. The man was visibly animated and was tugging his cuffs with excitement, pretending to correct his emerald cufflinks. "What is it, my dear?" Vivian looked at him incomprehensibly. "Is there something you haven't told me yet? I'm not leaving here until I know the whole truth." Stephen glanced nervously at his wife, and in her heart she had an unpleasant feeling that something was being kept from her. "It's just that you've chosen the wrong time to have this conversation," Stephen said at last. "We have to go to the theater now, and you're talking about your parents, your friends. Let's talk later." Vivi felt a sudden surge of anger and irritation. She kicked her foot forcefully on the fluffy carpet. Vivian felt herself begin to shake. She was clearly becoming hysterical, and her husband thankfully realized it too. Stephen jumped up to Vivi and hugged her tightly, trying to warm her up and calm her trembling. "Are you kidding me?" He stroked his spouse's back. "That's what I was talking about. It's too soon for you to be alone." He sat her down on the bed and said in a soft but sad voice, "Your parents? They died a long time ago, Vivi." "What? How long ago?" The girl could barely ask. Her husband nodded his head affirmatively. "It was a camping accident. Your mother and father were mountaineers and often rafted their kayaks on wild river places. One day their boat couldn't handle one of the rapids and flipped over." Vivi looked at her spouse with eyes red with tears. "Had they drowned?" He nodded sadly and stroked Vivi's cheek. "The river was very cold, and the current was very strong in those places. Their deaths were inevitable. I'm sorry, dear, I'm so sorry." Vivian burst into tears and buried her face in her husband's shoulder. "God, what a nightmare. Ah, how long ago it happened." "A long time ago, darling. You were only 20 at the time. You told me about it yourself." Stephen gently stroked his wife's head and whispered soothing words in her ear. Then he continued carefully. "And as for girlfriends, I bought you a new cell phone because your previous one broke during the accident. There are no other contacts in it, as I didn't want you to be disturbed by anyone else during your rehabilitation." Vivian calmed down a bit and, wiping her tears, said, "That's right. I didn't even think of that. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm so ashamed that I might have thought badly of you. I really thought you were hiding something from me." My husband only smiled and affectionately suggested, "If you want to meet with your friends, I'll give them your new number, but just be sure to stay in touch. During the walk, I need to know you're okay, you know." Vivi nodded. The news made her feel a little better. "Well, that's good," said her husband. "You know, I've changed my mind about going to the theater tonight. I think we have enough emotions for this evening. Let me put you a sedative that the doctor prescribed. and then we'll go to bed early? Okay, Vivi thought, and agreed. She was really emotionally exhausted. Her husband assured her that he was not offended by his wife's suspicion. He understood everything. After all, to live without the past is such a stress. After giving his wife an injection, Stephen exhaled with relief when she fell into a blissful sleep a few minutes later. That night he realized for the first time that he and Vivian had a long way to go before she finally accepted that her true place was in this house and in his, and only his, heart. That same night, Vivian had a very strange dream that later Vivek could not get out of her mind. In that dream, she could not realize where exactly she was. Everything around her was covered with bright orange flashes, and the woman herself could not breathe properly because of the smoke that entered her lungs. Bitter and acrid, the smoke mourned all the objects the businessman's wife was trying to reach in a futile attempt to save them from the oncoming flames. Vivi could feel the increasing heat in her skin, but she could see no way out of the smoky space. Then, as if out of nowhere, two blurry figures appeared in front of her. Vivian couldn't see exactly what they looked like, but she sensed that one of them, the taller one, was a man, and the other, the smaller one, was clearly a child. Vivian heard a strong male voice ahead of her. "Where are you, Vivian?" The voice repeated her name over and over again, and she tried to shout out quickly. "I am here." But no sound came out of her throat. In desperation, the woman grabbed her own neck and suddenly heard a child's shrill cry. "Mommy, mommy, here." And she began to thrash about in the blinding fiery mist, trying to reach or at least get closer to the ghostly figures that were calling her soul. She realized that she absolutely had to give them a sign that she was here, that she was alive and all was well. But the blurred silhouettes grew farther away the closer Vivian tried to get to them. Finally, in a rush of inhuman despair, the woman screamed into the void, watching the figures recede and disappear into the smoke. "Wait, please don't leave me here. Don't. I want to come to you. Wake up." Stephen called out to her, and at that moment the woman opened her huge blue eyes. It turned out that she was still lying in her bed, and her husband was sitting beside her, leaning over her and shaking her by the shoulders to make her wake up. Her husband's face was visibly troubled and sad. "What's the matter, Vivi? What did you see?" The spouse, still not fully awake from what she had seen, only waved her head and removed her husband's hands from her. "It's all right, Steve. It's nothing like that. It was just a nightmare." The young woman struggled to regain her breath and looked affectionately at her husband. "Don't worry, just give me a couple minutes." "Okay." Vivian turned on her other side, trying to control her feelings. What she had seen in her dream was so vivid and realistic that she couldn't shake the thought that it might well have been a memory. Except which one? And why hadn't she seen Stephen in this strange dream, as if he had nothing to do with it? "Was that you screaming?" Stephen said slowly. "Are you sure you don't need sedatives? I could get you some pills if you want." Vivi looked at her husband with frank surprise. "Are you serious, honey? Sedatives at 10 in the morning? Are you trying to turn me into a vegetable?" Stephen tensed for a moment, but Vivi laughed lightly and threw a pillow at him. "I was only joking, silly. Of course I don't mean anything like that. Really, it's just a bad dream. There's no need to take a pill every time I get emotional." Stephen smiled, but somehow not cheerfully, as if he felt guilty about something. However, quickly pretending that nothing of the sort had happened, he offered his favorite wife to drink coffee together. "Mom today even baked us cheesecakes before rushing to work. As long as I live, every time I am amazed at her amazing ability to combine the talents of a housewife and a businesswoman." "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed," Vivian said with her hands clasped in front of her face. "I was supposed to get up early and prepare everything. Instead, I have to bother your mother in the kitchen." Stephen only waved his hand and then gently kissed his wife on the cheek. "You just don't know her. In fact, she was always happy with all this amateur work with pots and pans. Before she lost her father, she was a housewife for a long time, raising me and taking care of my father when he came home from work. And then when Dad died of a heart attack, she got serious about the business. Daddy left us some inheritance. She used it to open her first beauty parlor. Vivian looked at her husband with genuine interest. It was the first time he had told her so frankly about his family. I was just a boy then. I had just turned 17. At first I could not accept this new identity of my mother. But then she explained to me clearly that in this life you have to fight for your own to the end, to gnaw with your teeth, but not to give it to anyone. So I entered first the institute at the Faculty of Economics, and then got a job in a bank. But gradually I made my way into the world, found myself. Stephen tenderly embraced Vivian, and she allowed himself to kiss her for real. For a moment, the woman thought that the dream she had had was just a meaningless nightmare. A couple of hours later, when her husband was about to go to work, Vivian's phone suddenly rang insistently. Looking at the screen, the woman was surprised to find that the call was from an unknown number. "Pick up the phone," Stephen advised her, throwing his jacket over his shoulders. "I'm sure you'll be glad to know who's calling." Really, Vivi raised her eyebrows and answered the incoming call. Hello. Is that you?" An unfamiliar female voice sounded in the receiver. "Yes, it's Vivian Smith," Vivi answered, perplexed, and looked at her husband. "Who's speaking?" There was a second pause at the other end of the line, and then the same thin voice said, offended, "No, you don't recognize me, of course. Steve said that you had a memory problem, but to be so." Vivian looked at her husband again, dismissing the questions like, "Who's that?" But the man only winked at her and pointed to his watch. In a hurry, he whispered with just his lips, "I'll hang up." Then her husband went off to work with a satisfied look, leaving Vivian utterly confused. She reminded herself that Cindy was due home in half an hour to check on her and see if everything was all right. So who should she deal with, her mother-in-law or the one who was tearing her phone apart? The caller continued to bombard Vivi with endless questions. "Listen, you seriously don't remember us? It's me, Laurel, your best friend. Steve told us you were off limits while you were in treatment. We apologized profusely during that time. And then yesterday he texts us and tells us to take you out to New York City. No, he's always been Mr. Spontaneous. I'm sorry to be so blunt." "Wait, Laurel, stop." Vivi tried to calm her down. "Are you saying that you and I used to be friends before the accident? I mean, you're my best friend?" "I'm sure I am," she said, and then added a moment later, "No, well, you've even been friends with Ellen for a long time, but not as close as you are with me." Embarrassed by the appearance of another person in her life, whom she did not remember at all, Vivi proposed Laurel to meet in the city center, in the same cafe where they usually liked to be with her husband. The woman wanted to talk to this girl and try to remember her. After all, Laurel was so insistent that they had known each other for years. However, meeting her friend had only disappointed Vivian, to say the least. Not only did she remember absolutely nothing of the things the girl had told her, but Laurel was also a very unpleasant person in her own right. Vivi couldn't believe that she had trusted this nasty and jealous girl with all her secrets. She would never share anything with such a gossipy girl. While they were sitting in the cafe, she had managed to wash her hands of all their mutual acquaintances. And although half of them Vivian had never even seen, she was offended that Laurel was so unashamedly throwing dirt on everyone. "So, you say we worked together in the modeling business?" Vivian asked at one point to interrupt her endless rant. Laurel was silent for a second, as if her internal computer was struggling to process this simple question. Finally, an uncertain smile appeared on her face. "Yes, and don't you remember our shows in Milan? How you and I discussed that famous model? She looks so beautiful in all the magazines, but in reality she's fat. It still amazes me what those agents saw in her. She's a natural scarecrow." Laurel laughed unpleasantly, revealing her large white teeth. Vivi continued to stir the rest of her milkshake in a tall glass with a straw. "Who do I like better, dogs or cats?" Vivi asked again. What her friend stared at her with long, thickly painted eyelashes. "What's cats got to do with it?" Vivian looked at her carefully. "But it's such a simple question. You say you've known me since high school. Then you can't help but know what kind of animals I like more. All best friends answer questions like that with ease, especially when some of them have memory problems. What Vivian certainly didn't expect was that Laurel would suddenly pull out her cell phone out of the blue and start hysterically texting something in it to someone. "What are you doing?" Vivi asked her with a smile. She wouldn't be surprised if Laurel was posting some nasty things about her on the internet right now. But she didn't care about that at all. She just wanted to understand what was going on here. Laurel finished fiddling with her smartphone and with a strained grin, obviously meant to portray a smile, she said. "Vivian, I've been called away on an emergency shoot. I'd love to talk to you more, but unlike you, I don't have a rich husband, so I have to work up a sweat." Laurel jumped up from the table and gave Vivian a kiss. "Don't be upset, Vivi, we'll talk to you later, and then you'll feel better." "Xiao, darling, I'll be in touch." With those words, the red-haired gossip girl flew away from the cafe like a bright but silly butterfly. There seemed to be something wrong with Laurel. Vivian Vivek couldn't believe she would choose such a mercenary as her mate. Besides, she didn't know the answer to her simple question. And the whole thing with the phone? She was just looking for an excuse to leave quickly and not continue the awkward conversation. But what could it mean? Vivian was at a loss to guess. She had too many questions about her own past, and none of them had been answered yet. Hearing the phone vibrate in her purse, the woman picked it up immediately. "Hello, honey, how are you?" Stephen asked, calling her from work. To be honest, not so good, her wife admitted to him. "I didn't like it at all. What kind of friend is she who only has clothes and gossip on her mind?" "Really?" I could hear the tension in her husband's voice. "You don't have to talk to her if you want to. I just thought it would be good for you to spend some time with old acquaintances. You said so yourself." Yes, I remember," Vivi reassured him. "It just wasn't as heartwarming as I'd imagined. I'm going home now, Mary's already there. I could cook us all something original for dinner tonight." They chatted a little more about household matters, after which Vivian hung up the phone and headed home on foot. She wanted to walk a little, to be alone with her thoughts, and just to rest in silence after Laurel's rapid chatter. The weather that day was marvelous. Spring was in full swing. Apple trees were blooming everywhere. The flower beds were bursting with blossoming flowers. The air was fragrant with the scents of flowers and herbs. And Vivian lingered for a couple of minutes in one of the yards near the playground, looking at the happy little children playing in the sandbox. At the sight of this idyllic scene, she was suddenly overwhelmed by an incredible longing. "I wish Stephen and I had a baby of our own. That's how I could sit and watch our son or daughter now. Maybe then I'd feel a lot more at peace." The young woman sat down on the bench, watching other people's children with pleasure. Some of them were happily swinging on the swings, while their mothers looked proudly in Vivian's direction. "Look, envy, what happiness we have growing up." Suddenly, Vivian felt her hands and feet go cold. Something switched in the young woman's mind, and she clearly, as if in reality, saw herself rocking a small child in her arms. The newborn was sleeping peacefully. His eyes were closed. At that moment, Vivian was absolutely sure that she was holding her own son in her arms. However, her vision did not end there. The woman felt strong and gentle arms around her shoulders. Vivian turned around to look at the child's father, and to her great amazement, she saw in front of her not Stephen at all. A tall, broad-shouldered, handsome man with deep dark green eyes and golden curly hair. Vivian did not fit the image of her husband. Stephen was a stocky brunette, slender but a little taller than herself. This stranger, on the other hand, looked as if he had stepped out of the pages of ancient legends. Vivian did not know this beautiful man, nor the child she held in her arms, but she was sure that they both had something to do with her. Could it be that Stephen was hiding something from her after all? Was it possible that Vivian had another family before him? But then where are they? What happened to them? Intrigued, Vivian immediately hurried home. She eagerly awaited her husband's return so she could talk to him about her vision. Cindy, seeing how worried her daughter-in-law was, became nervous herself. Seating Vivian in the kitchen, she tried to quickly question her about what had happened and how the meeting with her friend had gone. But Vivian was not in the mood for a heart-to-heart talk with her mother-in-law. "Is there anything I can do for you, dear?" Cindy asked, looking into Vivian's eyes. I'm afraid Stephen is the only one who can help me here, she sighed. I need to have a very serious talk with him. A shadow passed over the older woman's face, the nature of which Vivian could not determine. The young woman said she needed to rest, and then went upstairs to her room. That same evening, when Stephen returned home, Vivian immediately called him to her room and told him frankly of her sudden recollection. After listening to his wife, the businessman was a little confused at first, but quickly pulled himself together. Vivian was amazed at how quickly the emotions on his face changed. In a few moments she could distinguish surprise, anger, confusion, and then a calm calmness that hid all the other feelings. "Vivian, darling, listen to me very carefully," he began, setting his wife down on the bed. "What you are saying is impossible." "But why?" She looked at him perplexed. "Stephen, I feel that these people are somehow connected to me, and very strongly. That emotion, that image, it was so real, so familiar. If there's anything I don't know about myself, you have to tell me." Stephen covered his face with his hands, as if trying to shut out his own feelings. "The doctors warned me that this kind of thing could happen," he said slowly. "You've been in a coma too long, and part of your brain is still not fully recovered." "What do you mean, Stephen?" Vivian interrogated him. "What's wrong with me?" Her husband looked at her sorrowfully. "Visions, hallucinations. The doctor said it could be the effects of a coma." "I'm sorry, Vivian, I should have told you sooner." Vivian didn't immediately realize what her husband was telling her. When she did, she shook her head negatively. "No, Stephen, no. That's the thing. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. I'm sure I saw a part of my past, but I can't figure out when it was, or who these people are to me." Stephen looked at his wife with unspeakable regret. "Honey, that's the way it is sometimes. You may have experienced a powerful emotional jolt when you looked at the children. So your mind tried to deceive you, to make you wishful thinking." No, Vivian persisted. "I'm normal, Stephen. I know for a fact that I've seen these people before. Stephen, I didn't tell you about my dream, that nightmare." "I guessed it right away," he nodded. "Yes," confirmed Vivian. "I think I saw the same man and boy. Only it was later than the memories on the playground." Stephen's face immediately darkened. "Vivian, let's not try to find an explanation for your delusions. I'm certainly not very pleased that you see some strange man in your visions. But as for the child..." Vivian jumped out of bed and nervously splayed her hands. "Yes, Stephen, I wanted to ask another question. Why we still don't have children? You just said that the memory could have been triggered by children playing. What did you mean by that?" Instead of answering, her spouse slowly got out of bed, then calmly walked over to the small medicine cabinet and pulled out a syringe of sedative from there. Noticing this, Vivian stepped back. "No, Stephen, I don't want a sedative. Explain to me what those kids and my visions have to do with each other. Stephen, what are you doing?" The young woman's eyes filled with pure terror as her husband began to step toward her, holding the finished shot in his hand. His face was completely impenetrable. "Honey, it's okay, don't worry, you just need to calm down a bit. Look at you, you're shaking all over." Vivian retreated further and further until she finally felt something solid under her back. It was a wall. The young woman's heart filled with panic. She turned around in an attempt to find a way out. But at that moment, her husband grabbed her arms sharply, depriving her of the opportunity to resist. "Stephen, please don't," Vivian begged. "I don't want to. I'm scared." Stephen forcefully pulled his wife against him, and in one deft movement stuck a syringe with a sedative into her neck. "Don't be afraid, honey, don't be afraid. It's okay," he whispered. "I'll never let you go. Never. We'll always be together." Vivian's eyes immediately went blurry. The room was covered in mist in an instant. When Stephen loosened his embrace and laid her gently on the bed, the woman looked at him with a blank stare. Her body went limp, and she could no longer control it. "Sti. She barely audibly stretched out in a weakening voice. There was a mute question in her eyes. "Why?" "Honey, we don't have children because you're infertile," her husband suddenly said affectionately. "I did not want to talk about it." so as not to traumatize your already fragile psyche. But now I see that we can't do without it, Vivek. I'll have to call a psychotherapist for you tomorrow. He'll prescribe you a new course of medication and you'll definitely get better. No, everything inside Vivi screamed, but she couldn't say a word out loud. She didn't know what kind of drug her husband had injected her with, but she was sure that it was definitely not a sedative, more like tranquilizers. That's what we used to use to tame the horses on our farm. The woman's mind flashed somewhere on the farthest edge of her consciousness, between dream and reality. Vivian didn't have time to take hold of the thought, because everything around her was plunged into darkness. She didn't wake up until the next morning. Stephen wasn't around, so Vivi carefully slipped into the shower to wash away the remnants of sleep and the semi-fainting state caused by the strange medication. Vivian, shivering, thought, God, am I really not dreaming all this? She stood under the powerful jets of hot water. Did I really remember something Stephen didn't like, and that's why he did this to me? The woman twitched in disgust. She remembered the creepy expression that had flashed across Stephen's face the moment he'd given her the injection. God, he looked like a lunatic. I can't stay in this house around him anymore. I need answers. Slipping out of the bathroom, Vivian got dressed and cautiously made her way down to the first floor. She heard Stephen and his mother talking quietly to each other in the kitchen. To Vivi's surprise, the conversation between the relatives was in English. As she listened to them, she was amazed to realize that she understood them perfectly. But when the words made complete sense to her, Vivi was forced to slowly slide down the wall, sitting on the floor. Her legs refused to hold her up, instantly becoming absorbent cotton from the shock. Did I tell you were playing with fire, Cindy? Cindy rebuked her son. You shouldn't make fun of the girl. One day she'll remember her past, and the next day, God forbid, she'll put two and two together about Greg. What are we going to do if the truth comes out? Keep your voice down. Stephen shouted at her in English. I don't know why it happened. The doctors said that the effect of the drugs was 100%. She shouldn't remember anything from her past at all. Nothing that happened to her before me. Cindy shook her head doomedly. Do you realize what you've done, son? You've ruined her whole life. And you keep doing the same thing now. She'll never love you. She can't. She's too attached to the past. No, Mom. The businessman shouted loudly. Vivian is mine and mine alone, do you understand? I won't let her leave us and I won't let you tear us apart. Come to your senses, Stephen. Cindy pleaded with him. If you don't stop now, it's only going to get worse, Cindy continued. Do you really want a wife who has the memory of a fish? I mean, she's really going to go crazy like that. Is that what you want? For a moment, there was a long pause between mother and son. Then Vivi heard Stephen dialing someone's number on his phone. He never turned off the keypad's sound, so the numbers sounded subtle every time he touched them. What are you doing? Cindy asked him coldly in Russian. I'm calling Vivi's doctor, he answered calmly. Don't you dare, his mother whispered threateningly. I'm not going to be a part of this charade anymore. I've put up with it all this time just for your sake. Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of it, Stephen said confidently, and then started talking to someone Vivi couldn't hear. However, that was enough for the woman. Putting her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming in fear, she struggled to her feet and quickly ran back into her room. There, Vivi hastily threw some change of clothes and personal items into her backpack. She needed to wait until Stephen went to the airport. He had told his wife a couple of days ago that he was going on a very important business trip to London. This business trip was the only chance for Vivi to save her own life. The woman heard her husband's footsteps on the stairs and quickly shoved her backpack under the bed, lay back down and pulled the blanket up to her chin, pretending she wanted to lie down a little longer. There you are, my Sonia, Stephen said with a smile, entering the room. The time is almost 10. It's time to get up. The man stroked his wife's head affectionately, and she hardly smiled back. It's just that the day ended so abruptly yesterday. Vivi pretended that she didn't remember much about the previous evening. She stretched sweetly and put her hands on her husband's shoulders. He shouldn't have suspected anything. So Vivi played her part well, even if it was through effort. I'm leaving tonight, remember? Stephen asked her. Vivian nodded in agreement. Mom will look after you until the doctor comes, her husband continued. Cold, prickly goosebumps ran up and down Vivian's back. Be good and do whatever the doctor tells you to do, Stephen said. Okay? And I'll try to get back as soon as possible. 10 days, I think, at the most. Vivi's heart thundered in her chest. 10 days, she'd have almost 2 weeks to accomplish what she'd planned. Thank you, God. That long? Vivi asked aloud, desperately playing the model wife. But I'll miss you. Instead of answering, Stephen kissed his young wife. That's good, he said with a satisfied smile. I like you much better like this, and forget everything we talked about yesterday. I love you with or without children. Vivi nodded and smiled radiantly at him. As soon as the businessman left the house, the woman immediately jumped out of bed and continued packing. After taking some cash from her jewelry box and taking all the jewelry, Vivian felt she was ready. Whatever her husband was up to, if he was her husband at all, she wasn't going to stay in this house another minute. Vivian would find the answers to all her questions on her own, and finally find out who she was and how she had ended up in this golden prison. When the moment was right, Vivi slipped out through the emergency exit to the garage and from there slipped through the gate to the outside. As soon as the young woman crossed the threshold of the estate, everything in her soul literally sang, "Freedom." Vivian thought to herself, there is nothing better and more precious than this. After taking the bus to the city, Vivi immediately went to one unremarkable but decent hostel, which she had time to look up information about beforehand. She needed to hide in a place where Stephen wouldn't be able to find her right away. That's why any variant with a hotel or a fancy hotel was out of the question for her. First of all, Vivian didn't have that much money to pay for a room in them. Secondly, she wanted to minimize the use of her husband Stephen's bank cards. Vivian was well aware that as soon as he discovered her absence, it would be the cards that he would check first. Once she was settled in her micro-room, Vivian opened her laptop and began searching for information about herself, and then for all the psychologists in the city who used hypnosis in their work. As she thought, there wasn't much information about the Smith family on the internet, and most of it was about Stephen and his mother. True, she did find a few notes about their wedding. However, there were no details or photos from the celebration in those short notes. This is all strange, Vivian thought to herself as she looked through a sliver of a fashionable society magazine. Usually when a celebrity gets married, the journalists are there. But this was clearly not our case. Finished with her mini investigation, the young woman turned her attention to finding hypnotherapists. Soon she was lucky enough to find a private clinic where a psychology professor practicing aggressive hypnosis worked. After changing her clothes and pretending to be a really rich and wealthy lady, Vivian went to the address given on the website. The psychologist turned out to be a pleasant elderly man in his 60s. After looking at Vivian carefully, he asked, "I even set fire to that house of yours, along with your not-so-husband and your whole complex. I hoped if there wasn't even a reminder of who you once were, you'd finally think about it and choose me and our beautiful life together." Vivian was shaking all over, but she held on with all her might. "You scoundrel," she shouted at him. "I'll report you. You'll go to jail." Stephen only smiled unpleasantly. "No one will prove anything, my sweet." "How did you find me?" Vivi asked in desperation. "Have you been following me?" Smith smirked. "I figured out where you were thanks to a tiny tracking device I put in your phone. As soon as I got here, I immediately rushed over to where you wanted to sit out those few days. When I heard you'd gone to counseling, I knew anything could happen. So I came straight after you." The man made another circle around Vivi. "If you want to know where your kid is, I'll tell you he's in an orphanage. Only I don't know which one. I had my men drop your boy off with them. They didn't even tell me where, so you wouldn't be able to find him if anything went wrong." Vivi rose slowly to her feet, looking at him with all the hatred she could muster. "You're a monster," Vivi spat in his face. "We'll never be together. Not even if you're the last man on earth. Even if you erase my memory. I won't remember my own name. We'll never be together. Do you hear me? Never. Because I hate you and I'll always feel that hatred in my heart. Like I felt you were nothing to me. Like I felt I had Greg, the man I will love with all my heart forever, even after he's dead." The exhausted Vivi bent in half, expected that the businessman would probably just want to kill her now. But to her great amazement, Stephen's face was contorted with a grimace of genuine heartache. But it lasted only a moment, and then contempt flashed in his eyes again. Fool. What a fool you are, Vivian. I gave you everything. I've given you everything, and you ungrateful hysteric, have gone into things you shouldn't have known. Stephen kicked the woman in the stomach with his foot, and Vivian instantly gasped in pain. Flashes flickered in her eyes. You're a plant, Smith said, pulling out the barrel. And you asked for it. If you had only listened to me, I would have spared your stupid heart. Things might be very different now. Vivian, realizing that the inevitable finale was coming for her, closed her eyes tightly and whispered softly. Greg, my darling, I'm coming to you, my darling. And at the same second, Vivi felt a shadow fly past her. There was a rumble, but the woman felt nothing, only shrank with horror. When she opened her eyes, she saw someone big and strong hitting Stephen one after another, knocking the gun out of his hands. You bastard, you got it. She heard a quiet voice that sounded painfully familiar. Greg, Vivian said, not believing her ears. Is it really you? Are you alive? Greg knocked out the rogue businessman, then slowly turned around and rushed to his wife. In an armful of tenderly squeezed in an embrace exhausted sobs Vivi. It's all right, sweetheart. It's definitely going to be okay now. I'm alive. He's alive. She nodded toward Stephen. You didn't kill him? Greg only grinned slyly. Don't worry, the bastard will live. He's only in the cell now. I videotaped him abusing you and what he said about our farm. I think that'll be good enough for the police. Vivian gently pulled away from her husband. Greg, tell me what happened then. How did you manage to get out of the house? And Eden, did you hear what he said about our son? The giant man stroked his lover's cheek and smiled gently at her. Calm down, Vivi. At home we live in another city now. I couldn't stay here knowing you were dead, but that's what I thought at the time. Greg told Vivian that he managed to get out of the burning house in time when he found that everything around was on fire. They stunned me, the Bigfoot hombres. I saw them trying to get into the house, so I wanted to fight them back. But they were strong, the bastards. I woke up in the back room. I guess they were hoping I'd burn to death in there. What they didn't know is that we have a small exit there. I'd accidentally blocked it with gardening tools and I couldn't see it from the inside. Greg looked around to see if Stephen was all right, that is, if he had regained consciousness. Luckily, he was still unconscious. That's how I got out. I broke the glass first and then I tore up the boards to make it easier, Greg explained to his wife. His look became incredibly sad. He hugged Vivi again. She hugged him back. I buried you, Vivian, he said slowly. When the fire was put out, all I found was your bracelet and ring. I thought you were lost in the flames. Vivi looked at Greg with an inexpressible love and devotion in her eyes. No, they put me to sleep and took me away. Did you hear that? Yes, and he'll have to answer for it in court. You'll see, the man assured her, his eyes burning with righteous anger. I found my son almost immediately. I couldn't believe that they were ready to send the child to the grave innocently. Thank God, Greg said, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. Vivi saw the first gray in his temples. She reached up and stroked his hair. You found our son, you saved the baby. These thugs are not as smart as their master expected them to be, her husband explained to her. They gave our son to the first nearest orphanage. I didn't even have to go to the neighboring region. I took him right away. He, of course, was frightened a lot, but nothing. The guy is strong. Our dad was waiting for you to come for me, he said. He believed you'd save me from bad people. Vivian did not restrain her emotions any longer and kissed her lawful wedded husband firmly. Take me to our house, please, his wife asked him. I really want to see my son and I really want to be with you in our new home. Greg smiled, and wrinkles gathered in small clumps in the corners of his eyes. Of course, my favorite. We'll call the police first. We can't leave this gentleman here like this." When the police arrived, Greg explained everything thoroughly and showed them the tape. The investigator was shocked to learn that such a powerful man as Smith could go to such a heinous crime because of a trivial obsession with a woman, even one as beautiful as Vivian was. Now, Vivi's false husband faces a long prison sentence. His mother, Stacy, upon learning of what had happened, immediately left for another city. She no longer wanted to help her son in his crimes. "You've made your own mess. Now you have to clean it up," she said to Stephen. Greg and Vivian returned to their new home in a neighboring town. Greg, who has lost almost everything, is not discouraged. He hopes that in time he can build a new farm for their family and start over. He still has connections with some of his former employees, so he has no doubts about success. Eden, upon learning that his mom was alive, took it as the truest of miracles a toddler who is almost 5. Now every day puts a candle at home for the health of his mom, because he loves her very much and missed her very much all this time, while Vivian was actually in captivity at the businessman Smith. The Smith family is together again, and now truly happy. After all, they were able to pass such tests, which not every person on the birth falls. Vivian sincerely believes that only devotion and faith in her heart helped her to eventually remember her beloved husband and son, and rediscover herself. Found her under the fence mother-in-law, kicked out pregnant daughter-in-law. But she couldn't have imagined such a thing. Lexi remembered perfectly well how her father had left the family, trying to take almost everything he could carry out of the apartment. She had come back, rather late from her girlfriend's birthday party, and almost fell down, tangled in a pile of appliances, things, for some reason stacked at the doorstep. The girl even thought that someone had broken into the apartment and wanted to jump out into the entrance. But she heard her parents' voices coming from the big room, which served as a bedroom and a hall for the reception of merry companies. Hurriedly pulling off her boots, hanging her jacket on the coat rack, and tossing her backpack, Lexi headed out to find out what was going on, and caught a strange and scary scene. Her parents were fighting as hard as they had ever fought before, and didn't even pay her any attention when she peeked into the room. It was as if Lexi's daughter suddenly saw a total stranger instead of her adoring father, a violent, screaming man with a throbbing vein in his neck. It seemed as if this angry stranger was about to start destroying everything in the apartment, but instead he methodically walked around the room and collected things, not stopping to argue with his wife. "What makes you think I'm a horny deer? When were you ever going to tell me the truth? Never. Live, Eugene, wear horns, work and pay for everything. What made you so sure, Isabel, that I wasn't going anywhere? You thought I was a fool, so you stopped hiding your affairs. That's great. Don't think you're going to get away with this. If you file for alimony, you know I'll contest it. I'll have them do a forensic audit. I know now that all these years I've been raising a daughter who wasn't my own." Lexi froze on the threshold, shocked by such strange news. But her mom didn't look confused or hurt. If she had, she would have cried, claimed there had been a mistake, offered to double-check everything. But no. The woman responded just as aggressively to her husband. "Oh, Eugene, you make me laugh. He won't pay alimony. He's going to ask for a forensic test. Who are you going to hurt? Have you ever heard the saying about the father who raised the child? How are you going to explain to Lexi that she's nothing to you now? Won't you have a heart of hearts for her? You remember how much fun you two have playing together, skiing, even going fishing in the winter and summer. Are you going to forget all that? Throw it out of your head like garbage in a bucket. Good father." He forgot his daughter in no time. The man threw everything he had in his hands to the floor with rage and swung to hit his wife. But he held back and shouted, "How can I still treat her if she is a visible reminder of your sin? Isabel, you knew I wouldn't forgive adultery. Then why did you make me do it, even though there was a risk that it would come out? Raising someone else's child. What's inside? You couldn't wait for me to come back. I was traveling long distances for my family, trying to make more money so you wouldn't need anything. When Lexi was born, I worked even harder. What about a baby in the family? There's so much to do. I just don't know why I stayed up 24 hours a day sometimes. It turns out I didn't really have a family. Just a cheating wife and a kid that the nanny took out on the side. Eugene, I'm sorry, it was just a random episode. A moment of passion, nothing more. I've tried 100 times to explain it to you, but I was afraid you wouldn't understand. The man even found the strength to laugh. I wonder if Isabel's a thing. I think I had a right to know the truth from the beginning. Then maybe it wouldn't be so painful now. I fought with my mom for you. It was like she could feel your lying nature in her heart. Eugene turned away from Isabel so she wouldn't see the tears in his eyes and noticed Lexi standing in the doorway. The man felt uneasy. He'd thought of this girl as his daughter for so many years that it was impossible to fall out of love with her overnight. "I'm sorry, Lexi," the man said, and began to gather up the things he had left behind. Then, waving his hand, he sat down on the couch. "Lexi." Mom didn't know what to say. The girl solved the problem herself. Walking up to the man, she lowered herself to the floor in front of him so she could look into his eyes and said quietly, "For me, you will forever remain the most real daddy. Just so you know, whenever you want to talk to me, I'll always be glad to." The man couldn't help himself. On impulse, he hugged the girl he had considered his daughter for 14 years and headed for the exit. Lexi heard the head of the family rumbling something in the hallway, but she didn't go out. To the girl in general, this situation seemed like some kind of strange, sticky nightmare. Only when the front door slammed, she dared to ask, "Mom, how come? Why did Daddy think I wasn't his own daughter?" Isabel, from whom the subtle odor of booze emanated, did not lie. "Oh, but it's embarrassing to tell your own daughter that. But you're an adult, so listen, if only so you don't make the same mistakes I did. I married Eugene when I was 18 years old. He'd already been in the army, got a job as a delivery driver. He brought goods to the store where my mother, your grandmother, ran the store, and he saw me. Anyway, he started courting me. But his mother and my mother, of course, were against it. They thought we weren't a couple at all. My mother said I'd die of boredom with a village level. She said that he can only talk about the quality of manure, and with him even in the movies will be ashamed to go to the movies, not to mention the theater. But you remember your grandmother, Lexi, you should remember your grandmother. You were 10 years old when she left. Do you remember how she wasn't shy with her words?" A confused Lexi nodded. The grandmother she was named after, she remembered. She was always on parade, but she could express herself in such a way that there was nothing left to say. Isabel took a breath and continued to share the family secret with her daughter. "My mother-in-law, who, like my mother, also single-handedly raised a child, was not shy in expressions. Directly in my eyes called me a city slut. She declared that she would not give her blessing for her son's marriage to a slacker. But who would listen to the young people then? We got married, and of course I went to the village for 80 days. And then I settled down in this city apartment. We lived well, at least at first. Then money became scarce. My mother refused to help with finances. You do it yourself, children yourself, since you already consider yourself so mature that you got married. Friends advised Eugene that trucking was more profitable, and he started traveling. The money did get better, but I got bored. So I decided to go to my high school reunion to get some compliments. A guy who'd been courting me since high school just turned my head. Kind of made up for lost time. I'm not saying I resisted. Certainly had no reason to be proud of myself. It just so happens you're not really Eugene's daughter. Your real biological father, by the way, found out from me that you were born. But by then, he was getting married and didn't want to change anything in his life. So I had to keep lying. My mother-in-law, as soon as she saw you tiny, started saying that you were not from their family. She only came to visit a few times, and all the time she frowned as if she had eaten a lemon without sugar, so disgusting to look at. She never invited us to vacation. My mother-in-law couldn't know for sure that I had deceived her son, but she was convinced of it. And she didn't need proof. I'm sure she kept telling Eugene you weren't his daughter. Yes, she must have planted doubts in his mind, even though it took years. But today, Eugene, your father, has changed. I mean, not really, but, well, Eugene started making complaints about me for not doing my chores around the house, for coming home from work drunk. He said I was setting a bad example for you, his daughter. In general, in the heat of the moment, I couldn't stand it. I blurted out everything that I had kept secret for a long time. Blurted out that you are not his daughter at all. So stupidly, with my own tongue, I destroyed the delicate balance. Lexi didn't know what to do. She was drawn to her father. And paradoxically, she felt sorry for her mother. And it also hurt like crazy that her familiar world was crumbling. Lexi's class was made up of students from single-parent families. They seemed to try to pretend that they didn't care about having a mom and dad together. But Lexi still caught the occasional hint of jealousy. Lexi was genuinely happy, thinking her parents were quite happy. Up until this evening, her family had seemed like a safe haven. And now it appeared there was no idyll. It was all a sham. Lexi's good mood as she crossed the threshold of her home was gone. A vague and therefore even more frightening prospect loomed ahead. Before the court hearing where Lexi was to be asked which parent she wanted to stay with, Eugene approached her. He didn't look the girl in the eye and said, "I now, when not on the road, I live at my mom's place in the village. It's cheaper and more convenient. On the payment of alimony, I will not object, but take you to me cannot. Especially you know the whole truth, and I'm afraid with my mom you will not find common ground. I raised you, and you're a complete stranger to her." So Eugene asked the court to let Lexi live with her mom. Lexi got mad and screamed, uninhibited. "Fuck you and your alimony. And that crazy grandma, I don't even remember, fuck you. I don't need anything from you, I'll do without." Isabel, who was talking to an acquaintance, jumped up to her daughter and almost ex-husband and pulled the furious Lexi away from Eugene. The girl was sobbing. "Let's live without his help. I don't want to see him anymore, since he's so determined to eliminate me from his life." The divorce proceedings of Isabel and Eugene did not take long. The court made all the proper rulings, and the couple began a new phase of their lives. It would seem in the schedule of strong changes had not changed, because the head of the family for a long time was not at home. But the situation became something nervous. Isabel, like many women after the fateful changes, made a new haircut, began to pay special attention to her appearance. Of course, Lexi wanted her mom to be happy, even if it meant the breakup of a seemingly prosperous family. Of course, the dubious credit didn't belong to Eugene at all. At any rate, Lexi didn't blame her mom. And she reacted quite tolerantly to the news, which came less than a year after the final point in the family's unhappy history. "Anyway, daughter, we're having guests over tonight, Stephen, who's a friend of mine, and his son Kieran. I have 2 requests of you. First, I'd like you to help me clean up. Secondly, I want you to make a good impression on our guests. So dress tastefully, well, not flashy." Since that hopelessly ruined Saturday, Lexi had been in a constant stream of trouble. Isabel was literally spilling out in front of the guests, offering to taste the salad or the roasted meat. Stephen's bartending, who presented the landlady with 2 measly bouquets of 3 tulips, each looking like it was at least 1,000,000 scarlet roses, infuriated Lexi. Even more antipathetic to Lexi was Stephen's son Kieran. He was only a year older than Lexi and proudly announced to the crowd that he had no intention of wasting time in school and would apply to college after 9th grade. Stephen nodded contentedly as he listened to his son. Isabel, who always told her daughter to get higher education, also approved of this decision, but at the same time she asked worriedly, "Well done, Kieran. But probably in the college of deferment from the army is not." The guy grinned. "So I don't need it. I have chronic flat feet, just like my dad." In the middle of the evening, Stephen proposed, and Lexi was miffed that her mom hadn't even consulted her, but had said yes right away. He clinked his juice glass with his fiancée and then started shouting, bitter. Like a fool. Lexi probably would have had an easier time accepting the next change if her mom and Stephen hadn't decided to move into the bride's spacious apartment and rent out the groom's place. When the guests, to the girl's relief, left, Lexi, clearing the table, asked her mom, "I just don't understand why your fiancé and his son decided to live with us if they have their own apartment. I'm happy to squeeze for the sake of strangers." Isabel was indignant. "No one will squeeze you. Kieran will live in the other room. Your nursery will still be your room and my room will still be mine." Lexi tried to explain her point of view. "It's still like a dorm. I don't think it's right. I can't even walk around half naked in my own house in the heat. It's a downer. If you want my opinion, I think it would be perfect if this Stephen of yours invited you to live with him. I can manage the housekeeping here without a problem." Isabel was adamant, and then she confessed. We're going to need money soon, so we're going to have to rent the place out. I'm expecting Stephen's baby." Lexi understood that her mother, quite still a young 34-year-old woman, and such a scenario was quite predictable. However, the prospect of not only seeing a strange man and an unsympathetic guy all the time, but also becoming a babysitter loomed. This destroyed at the root of all the joy of the fact that the parent found her happiness. Stephen, unlike the man Lexi had long considered a father, didn't bother to work at all and mostly lay on the couch. Kieran, to the girl's great joy, did not flicker in front of her eyes for very long. One day he simply gathered his things in a bag and, asking his father for money, said, "Anyway, I'm moving in with a friend. She and I are kind of on good terms. Besides, her parents went abroad and from her house to college is a 3-minute walk. Okay, have fun. I'll send you money." "Just kidding. I'll come to you for financial support." Isabel tried to protest, reminding her stepson that he had just turned 16, but he smirked and said, "Isabel, you should be jumping for joy that I'm moving out, not playing the caring hen." Besides, he nodded at his stepmother's visible belly. "You'll soon have noise, screams, and the stench of maggots. What the hell do I need that kind of happiness for?" Stephen didn't scold for his rather brazen treatment of his stepmother. He took the money out of his wallet and, handing it to his son, grumbled angrily, "That's it. Go on, get out of here. We are going to reason here. He's a philosopher. He himself has long since left the larva stage. And what are you now according to your classification? A man. A mystery." He continued, making Lexi even more disgusted. But Kieran didn't seem to be used to such jokes. He took the bills held out to him and, picking up his bag, walked away. Lexi had a half-sister, Maggie, on the eve of the millennium, when the whole world was preparing for the millennium, and there was a serious discussion on TV about the year 2000 and possible computer hardware failures. So New Year's Eve spent with friends was pretty much the last island of calm of the period after Lexi's parents divorced. She cheered, sang songs, and desperately hoped that the gloomy premonitions wouldn't come true. However, things were turning out to be even worse than she could have predicted. For more than 3 years, since her mom had brought Maggie's youngest daughter's bundle home from the hospital, her oldest daughter, Lexi, had been getting the brunt of it. Lexi was the one who most often changed her sister's soiled diapers and diapers, threw laundry in the wash, hung it up, unfolded it, and so on in an endless circle. Stephen looked at his stepdaughter from the couch and chuckled, turning to his wife. "Isabel, you're a good girl. You're a young woman to have a baby. First you got a nanny, and then a cradle." Even preparation for exams was not considered a valid reason for not doing some of the housework. Only once, when Lexi's fever was over 39 degrees, was she graciously allowed to be treated. Isabel now sided with Stephen in every argument. With her tacit consent, her stepson could take any item he liked from the house or ask for any amount of money, even without a promise to give it back. And for Lexi to buy anything for herself outside of her own means was out of the question. Her mother-in-law, Janie Swan, treated Lexi like a waste of space or a servant, and when she visited, she never brought the girl an apple. Though she did bring her adult grandson, Kieran, despite the fact that he lived apart from his own grandson, early fruit and sweets in bags. Stephen would then pick up the goodies intended for Kieran and take them to his girlfriend's apartment. Simple-minded Maggie, who had seen Lexi around her more often than her mother since she was a baby, treated her little sister to the gifts she had received. Only the girl did not have the conscience to offend the child. Under such conditions, Lexi considered entering the teacher training college on the budget as the real miracle and made every effort not to be expelled. However, it became more and more difficult. Another morning in the family began with a scandal. Isabel shouted that it was time to get up and take her daughter to daycare. Lexi sluggishly resisted. "Mommy, but I can't today, I'm exhausted." To ask that Stephen for once his own, by the way, his daughter took. "I did the dishes again yesterday after everyone else. I didn't get my essay typed up until 4 this morning. I have a second period today, so I can sleep in instead of dragging myself through the nasty weather to this equally nasty daycare." Lexi wanted to add that she hadn't actually asked her mom to give birth to Maggie, but she bit her tongue. It wasn't the girl's fault that the main care about her was dumped on her older sister. Even without that phrase, however, a quarrel had broken out. Isabel shouted in unison with Stephen that she, Lexi, was completely ungrateful and did not remember any good at all. By the way, I'm the one who feeds and sings you, you slacker. She's learning to work her ass off, Stephen grumbled. There was nothing unusual in these reproaches, though. Perhaps if Lexi wasn't so tired, she would have kept quiet, as she often did. But it all came together. Her studies, her part-time job, the household chores the rest of her family generously placed on her, the annoyance of a strange man invading her apartment, and the lack of sleep all combined to form a potent mix. Lexi dozed off in her tracksuit, then jumped up and stood in front of Stephen and began to say what she had to say. I don't see your highness doing anything at all. Your mom does all the work, and I get a lot of work too. I love Maggie very much, but it's time you did something for your daughter, Stephen. Who are you? Stephen exclaimed. Lexi instinctively ducked, noticing the palm of her stepfather's hand flying in her direction, deciding to slap her back. After getting past her mom and running out of the room, Lexi found Kieran in the hallway. The boy was just taking off his shoes and muttered a greeting. Let's eat. I haven't eaten since yesterday lunch. Laura gave me a hard time and wouldn't even let me come home. Isabel yelled that it was time to get up and take my daughter to daycare. Lexi fought back. Mom, but I can't today. I'm exhausted. To ask that Stephen for once his own, by the way, the daughter took. I did the dishes again yesterday after everyone else. I didn't get my essay typed up until 4 this morning. I have a second period today so I can sleep in instead of dragging myself through the nasty weather to this equally nasty daycare. Lexi wanted to add that she hadn't actually asked her mom to give birth to Maggie, but she bit her tongue. It wasn't the girl's fault that the main care about her was dumped on her older sister. Even without that phrase, however, a quarrel had broken out. Isabel shouted in unison with Stephen that she, Lexi, was completely ungrateful and did not remember any good at all. By the way, I'm the one who feeds and sings you, you slacker. She's learning to work her ass off, Stephen grumbled. There was nothing unusual in these reproaches, though. Perhaps if Lexi hadn't been so tired, she would have kept quiet, as she often did. But it all came together. Her studies, her part-time job, the household chores the rest of her family generously placed on her, the annoyance of a strange man invading her apartment, and the lack of sleep all combined to form a potent mix. Lexi dozed off in her tracksuit, then jumped up and stood in front of Stephen and began to say everything she had accumulated. I don't see your highness doing anything. Your mom does all the work, and I get a lot of work too. I love Maggie very much, but it's time you did something for your daughter, Stephen. Who are you? Stephen exclaimed. Lexi instinctively ducked, noticing the palm of her stepfather's hand flying in her direction, deciding to slap her back. After getting past her mom and running out of the room, Lexi found Kieran in the hallway. The boy was just taking off his shoes and muttered a greeting. Let's eat. I haven't eaten since lunch yesterday. Laura gave me a hard time and wouldn't even let me come home. Isabel was yelling at me to get up and take Maggie to daycare. Lexi fought back sluggishly. It had been over a year since she'd seen Eugene. Their last phone conversation had been crumpled. It seemed Eugene was trying to cope with a personal tragedy by overworking himself beyond measure. Lexi's attempts to call him had been unsuccessful, and there were no replies to messages sent. I guess my mom is keeping quiet about the mystery of my birth because of my lover, Lexi thought. And everything would have been fine up until now. Now I have to suffer through an old mom's sin. As expected, the apartment was rearranged that evening when Maggie's crib was brought in. Lexi's already small room was cramped, but there was no other option. She flatly refused to stay in the pass-through room, which caused a scornful remark from Kieran. Oh, you'd think someone would be looking at you. The guy was clearly being sly, though. Lexi noticed that he didn't miss the opportunity to stare at her unhindered. Since Kieran had moved in, things had gotten worse. When no one was around to see, he made lewd suggestions to his stepsister, though he reduced them to jokes afterward. He pinched the girl, slapped her ass, and laughed in her face, noticing the consternation in Lexi's eyes. She repeatedly complained to her mother. The latter promised to deal with her stepson, but the conversations had no positive effect. Kieran didn't put Isabel in any way, and, making round eyes, presented the situation as if it was Lexi who was hitting on him, not him. Stephen, who had been advised by his stepdaughter to rein in his son, stood up for him. And you, too. Don't play the innocent part in front of Kieran. There's no place for a modern girl to try out. Lexi realized that there would be no help from her mother, and even less from her insolent husband. Sometimes Kieran would go away for a few days. Only then did Lexi sigh in relative peace. One summer morning, Isabel had taken Maggie to daycare early so her oldest daughter could sleep in a little longer, building up her strength for her last exam. Lexi rejoiced in vain at this good fortune, however, because as she was taking a shower, Kieran opened the bathroom door in the most unceremonious manner, ripping out a lock of hair on one side. Smirking, Kieran stated to the half-sister hiding behind the translucent curtain, "Hear me out, cutie. Or shall we start with me rubbing your back?" Grabbing the first vial from the shelf, the girl threw it at the insolent man. It was unlikely to scare him off, but someone rang demandingly at the apartment door, and Kieran muttered, "You've interrupted me at the most interesting point. I'm going to go see who's here." Lexi, horrified, hurriedly threw on her robe and ran to her room to get dressed. What was outside the door didn't inspire confidence in the girl. Dressing quickly, she pulled a pepper spray out of her backpack, determined to use it without any warning if Kieran got in her way. Without even combing her hair, she began to make her way to the exit. Fortunately, she didn't run into her half-brother. From the sound of water running, he was in the bathroom. The girl was furious. She was running out of patience. Of course, she could change the lock to a stronger one, but she realized that it would not solve the main problem. She was defenseless against Kieran, who did whatever he wanted. She wasn't going to be a victim, so she planned a serious conversation for tonight. Having passed the last difficult exam scheduled for that day, even better than one could expect after the stress of the morning, and thus closing the summer session, Lexi was glad that at least this problem was over. As agreed, the girl picked Maggie up at the daycare center, and on the way home she pondered how to start a conversation with all the residents of the apartment. She didn't want her little sister to witness the scandal. But it was possible to send her to the nursery to watch cartoons. What child would refuse? In the meantime, she would raise the central issue that having Kieran living in the apartment was in no way acceptable. After Maggie rushed off to the nursery after dinner, Lexi asked to stay in the kitchen for Stephen, who was about to go to his favorite couch by the TV. Kieran clearly didn't expect Lexi to dare tell him about his morning prank. He immediately started making excuses. "I didn't realize the bathroom was occupied." It was obvious he was lying, and the girl blushed with indignation. Oh, what an ignoramus. And the fact that the water was on and the bathroom door was closed from the inside didn't clue you into anything. What are you lying about? Lexi took a breath to calm down a bit, to keep her tone of voice even and not startle Maggie with a scream, and continued. "Anyway, Kieran, I can't stay under the same roof with you. Nothing good will come of it. With Mom and Stephen, you're still somehow playing the part of a decent person. But as soon as you and I are alone together, how do you act?" It was noticeable that Kieran was nervous, but trying to make excuses for himself. "Ugh, you're so serious. I was just trying to make a joke. So what if you're pretty? Do you even look at yourself in the mirror? There will be no reaction to your lean appearance. A liter of water won't be enough to make me want to look at you." Her half-brother's hurtful taunts didn't hurt her, and she gave her mother an ultimatum. "You can't go on living like this. I'm very concerned about Kieran's behavior. Mom, either you kick him out or I'm leaving." Stephen had been silent until then, but now he cut into the conversation. "Then go. Get the hell out of here. You're provoking Kieran yourself. As the saying goes, if the dog won't do it, the purse won't do it. I don't need you accusing him of any wrongdoing. That snake is hungry. Get out to here. You don't need to be slinging mud at my son in the hutch." Lexi was hurt not so much by her stepfather's words, but by the fact that her mom hadn't even thought to defend her. Isabel was silent. She acted as if she'd talked to Stephen about it a long time ago and decided everything was not in her daughter's favor. "Mom, why aren't you saying anything? That you won't even say a word in defense of your daughter, who is now being insulted by your husband? Or do you also think I'm provoking this Kieran? Or is having a man in the house more important to you than what happens to your daughter? Even two? Maggie's in danger too. I don't know what that Kieran guy's got in his head. She's little, and she'll be easy for him to handle it all," Lexi pleaded. Stephen became enraged. "You cunt, keep your fucking mouth shut. If I ever hear that kind of suspicion about Kieran again, I'll have you out of the apartment in a heartbeat." Lexi was confused for a few moments at her stepfather's insolence. She couldn't find the right words. And then, trying not to shout, she asked, "Is it okay that this is my mom's apartment and I'm registered here? How am I going to get out of here? Maybe it's you and your difficult junior who will vacate the territory. Kieran should have been in the army a long time ago, but you did your best to get him out of it. And now that bum's overexerting himself, he's groping me. So I want him out of here before I smash his empty head in. When's he gonna pinch me again or make me dirty with his eyes? Let that precious one go to his own apartment that's for rent. Or eventually let him rent, better yet. Both of you dreaming cowards out of here." Isabel didn't know how to extinguish the conflict that had erupted in the family. So she asked, "Let us all calm down and tomorrow we'll solve everything calmly. The morning is wiser in the evening." Lexi was uncomfortable with her mom's attitude. But she was so tired of arguing and fighting for her right to live in safety that she didn't even argue, as her stepfather tried to order and went to bed. Her premonitions were grim. Judging by her mother's behavior, she wasn't going to chase any of the men away, so she would have to leave on her own. Okay, at least the session is behind us. You can, as an option, ask for somewhere in a children's camp, even if not a counselor, just as long as here, in the home apartment, where she no longer felt safe, not to stay. Sleep wasn't in either eye. When Lexi heard someone approach the room over the creak of the floors, the girl realized the person on the other side of the door was stomping around, apparently listening to see if the girls were asleep or not. The situation didn't seem to arouse any suspicion. The doorknob crept down and the girl could make out the silhouette of Kieran in the opening. He headed toward her bed and nearly jumped when Lexi's quiet voice sounded. "You make one more move in my direction, and I'll have the whole house ransacked. Will you have to explain what you're doing in a girl's bedroom?" He also whispered back, "Scared you? I'll think of something." The stepbrother was approaching, and Lexi didn't hesitate to yell. She yelled at full force, as if releasing her accumulated irritation and anger. The girl didn't care. Nothing was stopping her. "What's that roaring?" Maggie woke up. And the neighbor from downstairs, a not quite adequate bile man, banged on the radiator. Lexi didn't stop screaming even when her mother and stepfather appeared in the room. The girl was silent only when Kieran splashed a glass of water in her face, which stood on the nightstand of the youngest daughter. It didn't calm the girl, but it did silence her from the liquid that had entered her mouth. "Maggie, stand up for Lexi," the girl pleaded. "Lyra, something you said to Lexi about her selfishness, bad parenting." But the girl didn't care under that eerie cacophony. Lexi hurriedly gathered her things. "I'm not staying here a second longer. I highly doubt Kieran showed up here in the middle of the night to apologize. Anyway, Mom, I'm off and I expect you to pay for your share of this apartment, or get that creep completely out of my sight." Stephen glared at Kieran and his furious stepdaughter with clearly discernible anger, and did not react to his sobbing daughter. Isabel, clutching her head, went to get her medication, reporting to nowhere. "God, what's the big deal about having a material dispute in the middle of the night? I need to take a sedative." Lexi crouched down next to Maggie, stroked her head, said goodbye, and passing the kitchen where her mom sat at the table, reminded her, "I'm expecting a call, and as soon as possible for the rest of your stuff I'll come back later. Hopefully everything will be safe." Lexi was shaking with anger, but she stubbornly walked toward the train station to go to the only person who could help her. In the waiting room, Lexi opened the secret notebook she thought her roommate had given her in 3rd or 4th grade. She found the entry she wanted among the pages: 11 Main Street, Maryberry Village, 11 Main Street. Janie swung a line that Eugene had written long ago, when Lexi still had what she thought was a strong, happy family, and said it was his mom's name and address. The man promised that one day they would all go to visit her to try to move past their former differences. Lexi oriented herself and bought a ticket to the station closest to this Holmesley. Based on the information, it would take a walk of about 4 kilometers. But that wasn't what was confusing Lexi. She strained to think about what to say to Janie Swan. How to introduce herself, your son's ex-daughter, your ex-daughter-in-law's daughter. Eugene's acquaintance, the one he'd long thought was his daughter. The girl pored over the options but couldn't find the perfect one. Getting to her destination, however, was a breeze. And soon Lexi was standing at the fence with a sign with the correct address attached to it. She didn't dare to introduce herself to the woman in the tracksuit who was weeding the front garden and, to all appearances, was Janie Swan. She simply asked, "Hi, can I see Eugene?" Lexi had no idea that a quite innocuous phrase could have such an effect. The woman threw herself to the ground and seemed to wriggle like a wounded animal. Lexi hesitated only for a few seconds before dropping her things, opening the wicket and running up to the woman. "Janie Swan, get up. Can I help you?" The elderly woman didn't immediately begin to calm down, and it wasn't until a few minutes later that Lexi was able to lift her off the ground and bring her to a bench under a tree. Janie Swan exhaled noisily, pulled a vial out of her pocket, and ordered, "From home, get me a mug of water and some pills from the fridge." Peering into the box, Lexi spotted the medicine for Stephen and a vial of valerian. She ran into the house, and after quickly finding all the medications she needed, she rushed to find the old lady. On the table, she noticed a photo of Eugene with a black ribbon across it. She felt bitter to the point of tears and sobbed. Eugene was the only person she considered a father. And even though it was Kieran's fault that the relationship between the supposed relatives had been destroyed, Lexi still missed him. She now realized what had caused Janie Swan to react so violently and was completely at a loss as to how to explain who she was and why she had come, so as not to further tear the heart of the poor woman who had lost her son. After all, if it weren't for her complicated, unhappy family history, Lexi would need help. The girl brought pills and water to Janie Swan, and when she took the medicine, she asked, "Should we call the doctors?" Janie Swan shook her head. Then she brushed away a tear and wiped her eyes. She began to study the uninvited guest. The look of genuine regret in her grief-stricken eyes was suddenly prickly and angry. "Is this your fault with your slutty mom?" Poking Lexi painfully in the stomach, the woman slammed her fist on the ground and began to accuse. "You ruined my son, and you live happily yourself. You asshole, you're not even shy enough to come here to see me. If it wasn't for your shameless mother, you wouldn't have cheated my son. I know he'd be with some decent woman now, and everything would be different. I told him as soon as I saw you, a newborn, that Kieran was a scoundrel, trying to bind him to himself with someone else's child. Janichka didn't listen. And here's the result: he crashed his car, and it was as if he never existed. He didn't even leave me a granddaughter or a grandson, his own daughter. They buried him in the damp earth, that's all. There was Zhenya Gladyshev, and he's gone, just a grave left. Get out of my yard. Why did you come here? My eyes wouldn't have seen you." The woman, breathing heavily, got up from the bench and began to step on the guest, showering her with profanity. "You shameless bastard, you shameless mother. Get out before I take the sin on my soul. I'll maim you. I'm going to take my broom and beat you so hard you'll be dead." Lexi mumbled an apology, which Janie Swan didn't even seem to hear, and ran out of the yard, picking up the things that had been left by the fence. The girl decided to visit Eugene's last shelter. She couldn't see him as a stranger after all. She had seen where the cemetery was when she went to the Gladyshev's house, and it was not difficult to find the grave of the son of that mistress who was angry with her. A simple cross with a photograph and a plaque with 2 dates. That was all that was left of Eugene. Lexi felt as if all restraints had been lifted from her. She began to tell in front of the grave everything that plagued her. Tears ran down her cheeks as she complained. "Daddy, I don't know what to do at all. I have to look for a place to live, because my heart knows that my mother is not going to exchange the apartment. I don't want to be stuck in there with those difficult people. I just feel sorry for Maggie, but it's not like I can't help her. I can't help myself." Of course, Lexi didn't expect to have an epiphany at the cemetery and realize how to proceed. But after recounting her misadventures aloud and not holding back her sobs, a blissful emptiness set in. After saying goodbye, Lexi walked to the side and reached out and stroked Eugene's picture. "Goodbye. And don't be offended if I can't come for a long time." Love was leaving. Logs were piled by the fence near some house, and the girl decided to see if there was any live and work in the town next to the village. She pulled out her phone, and in doing so, the smart device, the first assistant of modern man, completely discharged. Her nerves were already on edge without this unpleasantness, and although Lexi thought she had no more tears left, she cried again. The girl didn't notice anything around her, not even the buzzing mosquitoes that stung unprotected parts of her body. Lexi almost jumped when a mocking male voice sounded above her head. "Hey girl, did you decide to make that pond? But it's no good. We have specially stacked logs here for building and you are pouring tears over them. Get up and come with me." Lexi raised her head, wiped away her tears, and looked at the handsome man standing in front of her, about 25 years old. The stranger held out his hand to her. So what was the tragedy? Lexi didn't share the details with the man and blamed her tears on her dead cell phone. "But if you have a charger, it's not a problem. You have my house right behind you. There's a free outlet. Let's go." The man held out his hand to the girl, but Lexi was hesitant to trust the stranger. "Joe," shouted a woman walking down the street. "Who's sitting under the fence?" The man smiled at Lexi and informed. "Joe, it's me. And that's my mom coming. Judging by the bags, the evening bus has arrived, and she and the driver of the sister of the guests handed over. I'm going to run to meet my mom, and you don't go anywhere. We'll solve the issue with your phone." Lexi had nowhere to go. Without the information support of her smartphone, she felt too insecure, suddenly afraid that she might have forgotten the charger during her hurried packing. The girl opened her bag and searched for it. To her great joy, she had it with her. Lexi exhaled. Now all that was left was to find a place with an outlet. She could try going to the local store. But she had no idea what hours it was open until. Joshua, after taking the bags from his mom, stepped first and hugged the girl and asked, "Well, now you're not afraid to go inside. It's not like we're going to be alone." Lexi replied, "I'm not afraid, but it's probably not very comfortable." "Oh, come on. What's your name, by the way? Because my mom won't understand that I'm bringing a strange girl into the house so easily." "Lexi. Well, nice to meet you. Grab your stuff and follow me. You can meet your mom at the house, 'cause I see you're already pretty bitten by mosquitoes." Joe put his bags on the kitchen floor and started charging his favorite phone. "But it seems to be blinking. Now you have to wait a little while and then you can turn it on and use it," he said. "Thank you, Joshua." Lexi started to thank him, but didn't have time to finish. The lady of the house appeared in the kitchen, breathing noisily. She looked at her guest carefully, rested her hands on her broad sides, and asked her son, "Joe, this girl is not one of ours. Explain who it is that is our guest." "Mom, this is Lexi." "Lexi?" The woman frowned. "What are you from Glendale? Last name Swan?" The girl didn't deny it, but clarified. "I had to see Eugene Swan. Much to my regret, I was too late." Tiana turned to Joe. "That's not her own daughter. Janie was complaining at the bus stop. She said she came in, gave her a heart attack, and went somewhere else." Joe couldn't resist an ironic remark. If Aunt Janie had had a heart attack, would she have gone to the bus stop instead of the nurse's station? Any alternative means of treatment practiced there? Tiana, as if not noticing her guest, replied to her son, "Oh, Joe. Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Janie wanted to find that newcomer by the hair. She said she wished her mother had kicked her ass when Eugene brought her into the house to meet her. Janie knew right away that her son would be unhappy with that woman, and that's how it happened. But you remember how. He came back from town a few years ago. You should have buried him, honest to God. The women said he brought almost nothing with him. Left it all to his wife and his estranged daughter, Lexi, here. They said Maggie had given him some serious horns during the marriage. Joshua wrinkled his nose. "Mom, you know I try not to listen to gossip." Tiana waved her hand and turned to the girl to satisfy her curiosity. "Where have you been? You've been sitting under our fence all the time. Why didn't you go straight to town or to the station?" Lexi answered. I went to the cemetery. You may not believe this, but I really feel sorry for my dad. I've never known any other dad. He was the one who wiped my tears when I got my first bad grade. He gave me my first bouquet of flowers, carried me on his shoulders, even braided my pigtails when my mom was busy. It wasn't easy to lose that kind of kinship all at once. She sat at the grave and didn't even notice how much time she spent there. Tiana's heart trembled, but she wondered, why did everything stop at ours? Was it just by chance? Where I could sit, I stopped. I'm sorry to bother you. Now the phone will charge a little, and I'll go away. Joe smiled. Mel, where are you going to go at night? By hitchhiking, of course, you can get to town. But a young and beautiful girl is hardly worth the risk. Mom, let's let Lexi sleep on the couch in the summer kitchen. It's warm, and she won't get cold. I'll take her tomorrow morning. Tiana was indignant. So as to rush to the aunt to pick up the transmitter, then you have no time. And when you go for a ride with a girl, I'd be happy to do that. It's not dark yet, though. We can pick honeysuckle, pea pods, and strawberries, radishes, parsley, and onions outside. It'll be fresher tomorrow morning. Take everything to your aunt and take it to her. Let her sell it. Now the first herbs, berries and vegetables are expensive. Everything will be a help. The woman shifted her gaze to Lexi and demanded, Anyway, while your phone is charging, let's go. Give me a hand, young lady. I need to get some rest since we're on the road tomorrow morning. Although picking small honeysuckle berries wasn't Lexi's usual task, she did it quite nimbly. Slowly but surely the cups filled with gray berries. Just as Tiana had instructed, Lexi didn't fill them to the top and compose them into the box with the cells. When the two bushes were relieved of their burden, Tiana called out to the girl, Come here. As Lexi approached, the woman outlined a new front of work for her. Look, pick the pea pods carefully, not all of them. Don't touch the unripe ones. You also need to make your bed. Lexi nodded. She wanted to thank the people who had decided to take her in. She didn't feel strong enough to go anywhere right now. At least a little respite was needed after the harvest was done. Tiana invited both her son and the uninvited guest to the table. It was only at that moment, when the smell of potatoes stewed with meat reached the girl, that she realized that all she had eaten all day was pies and soda at the train station. Trying not to look hungry, Lexi started eating. However, the attentive, scrutinizing glances Joshua was throwing at her made it hard for her to relax. The man really liked the girl, slender, modest, not a nasty character. She went together with his mother to the vegetable garden without any problems. She didn't even gesture her displeasure. And this despite the fact that it was obvious the girl is clearly a city girl, unused to the fresh air. She sits sluggishly after tea, her eyes closed. But the conversation her mother was having with her, asking about her life, was supportive. Joshua didn't really listen to the dialogue, but he even felt sorry for the guest who got instead of dinner to the interrogation, and he decided to stop the torment of the unfortunate. Mom, we're leaving early tomorrow. Just get Lexi some bedding, or else she just won't be able to wake up in time for tomorrow. Lexi, who was really tired both physically and mentally, looked at the man gratefully, and Joshua realized that he wished the girl would always look at him like that. He liked her more and more every minute. In the morning, Joshua drove Lexi to the neighborhood center, and as he prepared to park near his aunt's house, he asked the girl, Listen, are you heading back to your hometown or what? The girl shrugged. I don't know. I still have to think about it. I can't go home. I will probably look for a place in some children's institution. Of course, I don't have a diploma yet, but I have my credits with me. Maybe someone will take pity on a student. I'm looking for a live-in position. Joe slapped himself on the forehead and said, Look, why didn't I think of that? Let's go to my aunt's house together. Maybe she needs a helper for the summer season. She lives alone in her apartment, and I think she needs company. So Lexi found herself in a small district center 100 kilometers from his hometown at Joshua's Aunt Digit. The apartment was decorated in a minimalist style, and the girl was not very cozy in it. After a short acquaintance, the hostess asked Lexi to sit in the kitchen, and together with her nephew she went into the far room and asked, Well, why did you bring me this girl here? I have a decent apartment, by the way. Your mom already called me and warned me that you may not come alone. She's the one that Eugene's dumbass raised as his own for years. Her nephew saved her from having to tell the woman the situation. Lexi had simply asked him to get her a job at the market. That's it? I'm not going to be alone, Digit snapped. No, Joe, I can't trust anyone I don't know. It's a trade, after all. Especially since I've got a score to settle with that girl's mama. You were just a kid when Eugene brought that girl to the village to show her off. He wanted to marry me before that, by the way. How can I live in the same apartment with that bitch's daughter? That Lexi's family is rotten. So nephew, I'm sorry. Joshua tried to change his aunt's mind. But kids aren't responsible for their parents' sins. Or, in this case, the mother. Lexi seems pretty sane, so I don't think you'll regret it. Don't even say it. You want to help this Lexi. Give her some money to get home, and she can get a job in her big city. The wages are higher there, the landlady said. The hostess and her nephew entered the kitchen, and Digit said bluntly, I'm sorry, but I have my own private life, and your presence will be out of place. And I don't need any helpers. As they say, I can handle everything myself. Joshua didn't want to part with the beautiful Lexi, and he thought feverishly about how he could get her phone number. To the man's surprise, the girl wasn't upset at all, but even pleased. It's good that you don't have to. I was looking through the ads in my phone in a special boarding house, which somewhere, judging by the map, here in the area, requires a cleaner. Not a very prestigious profession, of course, but not deadly. In addition, an accommodation and food is provided. It's a fabulous offer. The only disadvantage is that there is no public transportation to this boarding house, as the smartphone suggested, so I would have to order a cab. A wild number just popped up on the screen. Joshua, I just have a favor to ask. Lend me the money to get there. As soon as I get my first paycheck, I'll wire it to you. But what if you go there, see it, listen to it, and you don't like it? Why don't I take you there? I'll wait to make sure everything's all right, and then I'll leave, Joe suggested. Digit, who had overheard this dialogue taking place in her kitchen, was not too surprised at his nephew's insistence. Joshua had always had a crush, ever since he was a little boy. I remember when he was about 6 years old, he brought a girl from the next street over to his house and told her that she was his fiancée who would be living with him. He also had a few hobbies at school. At the send-off to the army, at least 3 girls were shedding tears over him, and he had already grown up. After serving, Joshua returned to the village with his fiancée. She couldn't live in such conditions for long, though, and fled to her homeland before the wedding march. As far as Digit knew, Joe was not at all saddened by the failure of his marriage. He even seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and continued to lead an unmonastic life. And now the woman noticed a familiar gleam of excitement in her nephew's eyes. The hunter had his next victim in sight. Maybe she should have warned the poor thing, but Digit preferred not to interfere. First of all, this Lexi was clearly of legal age, from what the woman knew. Secondly, she had a beef with the woman's mother. Third, Digit knew her nephew. If he wanted the girl, he would get her. So let them do whatever they wanted, as long as they didn't touch her. Joshua gallantly opened the car door for Lexi, and Digit, watching the couple from the window, realized that the naive-looking young woman would have little chance to resist. Her instincts and experience did not fail her. Joe had really managed to get Lexi to like him, though he had to try harder, of course. Most of the thoughts of the girl, who was hired for a seasonal job at the boarding house, were occupied with the problem of housing. Lexi called her mom to see how she was going to solve the pressing apartment issue. But Tiana pleaded for more time. Daughter, but it's not that simple. We only have a 1-bedroom apartment in the bedroom district of the city, not a mansion on the main street. If you're going to do a 2-bedroom exchange, it's not going to work, she said almost every time she answered the same thing. Lexi, who monitored virtual bulletin boards in her free time and thought of different options, once couldn't stand it and said, Mom, and why did you even decide to change our apartment? Think about the fact that this housing you have a marriage. If you decide to divide it and then buy another apartment, then on its part will already be your future husband to claim in case of anything. I think it would be easiest to move Kieran to the apartment that his father Stephen rents to tenants. There was silence on the phone for a few seconds. Lexi guessed that there was some problem she didn't know about and asked directly. Mom, just answer me honestly, what's going on with your Stephen's apartment? Does he even have one? Or has he been bullshitting you all these years? Tiana, sighing, confessed. Stephen had an apartment, but he had to sell it in a hurry to keep Kieran out of jail. As it turned out, Laura had thrown him out of her home and life for a reason. Stephen did not tell me everything in detail, but the story could have ended badly for Kieran. Good thing the injured party agreed not to go to the police and settled the matter peacefully. Anyway, that's the way it is, daughter. Lexi kept trying to get her mom to understand that a person who had to buy her freedom with the price of an apartment could be dangerous. Mom, do you realize that? Putting himself and Maggie in danger. Obviously, this Kieran did not pick flowers from the flower bed or take change from other people's pockets. I mean, he's committed a pretty serious crime. And Daddy's a hard worker. Instead of letting his son go where he belongs, he sold the apartment and paid off a just retribution. Okay, Stephen's not afraid of his offspring. But why are you letting Kieran under the same roof as you and Maggie? Let him work, get his own apartment, and preferably far away. Lexi was not so much tired of the work, which, to be honest, was a lot, as from the constant persuasion. She could not persuade her mother to push her to close Kieran's access to the apartment. The only outlet for the girl was communication with Joshua. The man came to see her every weekend, and sometimes even on weekdays. At meetings, he showered her with compliments, brought various sweets and natural country products. The fewer days left until the end of the last shift, the more Lexi worried, not even knowing what to do. The deciding factor was one of the conversations she had with Joshua, who, hugging her tightly, whispered in her ear. Ah, Lexi, my love, no other way than a spell lived. How will I be without you? I don't know. Why don't you transfer to a correspondence school and move in with me? I'm out to here. I'll wither away without you. I know you're all high and mighty, but I'm from the bottom of the ladder, as they say. Lexi didn't say anything, but she liked the idea of moving. She felt herself falling in love with this man who cared for her so easily. Plus, if she accepted the invitation, she wouldn't have to go back to her mom's apartment and watch the nasty faces of Stephen and his offspring. Of course, it would take longer to study by correspondence, but it would be possible to live with the person she loved, even without formalizing the relationship. While the girl was thinking, Joe whispered, "You do not think. I'm not just offering you to come and live without a registry office. I realize that it's probably important to you. Just a little before the wedding happens, you'll come to me. That's all." Lexi looked Joshua in the eye to make sure he was serious. And he, as if catching a shadow of doubt, confirmed. "Yes, I'm asking you to get married. It usually takes a month from the time you apply to the time you get married. But it means practically nothing. You'll live as a wife from the first day you step foot in the house." Lexi agreed and spun in a whirlwind of happy worries. Tiana wasn't particularly happy that her son had brought Lexi home as his bride, but she could hear laughter coming from Joshua's room. The woman, wrinkling her nose squeamishly, whispered softly, "Having fun. I wish they were ashamed of me." They'd decided to have the wedding on neutral ground in Hartford, where Lexi had spent the summer. The bride, who already guessed that she was pregnant with her beloved Joe, did not want a large celebration and was glad that the future mother-in-law supports her. "Oh, it's not fashionable to have the whole village together now," Tiana said. "Yes, and rightly so. The money that will be spent on food and drink is better spent on something useful. Joshua's car needs changing, the roof needs fixing. And buy you a new bed, not so creaky, I think." Tiana couldn't help but sneer. In the end, Lexi invited only Isabel's mom and Maggie to sit in a modest cafe. She didn't want to see Stephen and Kieran at the table on the festive day. On the groom's side, only his mother had come. Aunt Digit refused to participate in the celebration flatly. Both Joshua, privy to the long history with Eugene, and the bride's mom understood why. Maggie missed her big sister. She sat on her lap for almost the entire meal. When after a modest sit-down, relatives of the bride and the newlyweds with the mother of the newlyweds had to leave in different directions, the girl even cried. Lexi's tears flowed too. She already had a hard time controlling her emotions and nerves. After a month of living with the restless Tiana, they were stretched to the limit. The woman literally wouldn't let her lie down to rest. All she had for Lexi was to work in the vegetable garden and greenhouse, to roll up jars with crops, to cook and clean the house. It was the daughter-in-law who had to do everything. Joshua, of course, helped whenever possible. But Tiana, for example, when she saw her son peeling onions, she would chase him out of the kitchen. "What are you doing?" "Doing woman's work. Go do Devonian things do." If the unhappy young woman in her mother's apartment was not a sweet life, then here she sometimes wanted to howl like a wolf. Tiana had taken almost everything from her. When Lexi told her about her pregnancy and the fact that she was having trouble tolerating certain smells because of her toxicosis, her mother-in-law went ballistic. When she was alone with her daughter-in-law, Tiana would bring up the young woman. "You come on, do not pretend in front of me. What am I, wasn't I pregnant? If you're sick, take an apple from the dirt and get to work. You know, they used to give birth in the fields and it was okay, they were all strong." Lexi didn't have the energy to argue and prove anything. She almost always wanted to sleep. From a cheerful and active beauty, she turned into a lifeless creature with bags under her eyes. Lexi realized that the pregnancy was going very differently than her mother had carried Maggie, and was terrified. One day she complained to Joshua. "I was told by Amelie from your paramedic office that swelling is the norm. When I told her that the internet advises further tests for such symptoms, she blatantly told me to go to the bathroom." Joshua: "I'm afraid Amelie is being a little careless with what I tell her. I don't have the best symptoms. Take me to the women's clinic, at least in the district center." Hearing this, Tiana didn't bitch. "Yes, our Amelie has experience as old as you are not. But a respected doctor should not be stipulated in my house. If she says you're normal, then you are. You're so smart. Do you want me to make remarks? That's right, she sent you away, you faker. You're a noble woman. If you don't trust Amelie, go to the district center. The bus runs twice a day. You leave in the morning, come back in the evening, Joshua won't have to travel. And the budget will be saved. You haven't brought a penny home, and you're still trying to ride our coattails to paradise. There's some dill on the shelf, brew it and drink it. It helped me with swelling." Showing thus care, the future grandmother went to one of her girlfriends, and Lexi, left alone with her husband, began to persuade. "Joshua, please take me to the district center. I feel like no amount of dill can help my condition. Why risk it?" The man nodded, but the woman was in a hurry to get somewhere and promised, "Okay, I'll figure something out." In the morning, however, when Lexi woke up, her spouse was no longer around. The woman got dressed and looked out into the yard. The car wasn't there either, and Tiana was fiddling in the front garden. "Good morning," Lexi greeted her mother-in-law. "Do you happen to know when Joshua will be back?" Without taking her eyes off her work, Tiana answered, "By tonight he probably will be. Digit had some kind of accident at work, and he rushed over to help." It was so frustrating that tears sprang from her eyes. Why didn't her husband wake her up when he knew she had to go to the district center? She would have packed in no time. To be more precise, she had everything already prepared for a visit to the counseling center. After getting a bottle of water, Lexi took her bag and, trying to calm down, headed for the gate. "How far are you going?" "I should pick some carrots. The forecast says it's going to rain next week." I heard my mother-in-law's voice behind me. "I'll go and wash them now, and then you'll go with a bucket and pick them." How to sit down at the table so you are in the lead. And when you help, so you run from the yard. Lexi turned around and, not holding back tears, answered, "I have to go to the hospital." "Where?" "Joshua could have given me a ride, by the way. Or did you talk him out of it on purpose so he could go alone?" "I've been working on my carrots." "That's very thoughtful of you." Tiana was angry. "Oh, that's how you talk. That's a snake on your chest, on your bread." Lexi did not listen to what insults her mother-in-law would come up with and headed to the bus stop so as not to miss the bus. The woman managed to get to a paid appointment with the doctor only closer to lunchtime. As expected, additional tests were prescribed which could not be taken for free. However, the rather young doctor who was in charge of the appointment advised her, "I certainly do not have the right to force you to urgently run and take tests in a paid center. However, when I was in your place, I did exactly that. Now my son is already 5 years old, just thanks to the timely diagnosed problem and correctly prescribed treatment. It is scary to think what would have happened if things had been different. Lexi thanked the doctor and called her husband as she left the counseling building. Joshua, I'm in the district center right now. Please drive up. I may not have enough money, because I still have to take paid tests. The doctor wasn't exactly scary, but I don't think there's any point in dragging it out now that I'm here. The man didn't apologize for leaving this morning without his wife. He even resented it. Do you know where I can get the money? Do you think I'm printing it? Lexi, hearing a woman's laughter and squeals in the background on the phone, as if someone was tickling someone, was so surprised she even ignored her husband's rudeness. Joshua, your mom said you went off to help Aunt Digit and you're out somewhere having fun. What is that supposed to mean anyway? Instead of an answer, however, the phone buzzed instead. In further attempts to call Joshua, the woman heard that the caller was unavailable. In the paid laboratory, the charming girl who was doing the paperwork asked if Lexi had eaten, made a discount, and after the blood draw even poured hot tea and offered cookies. Please help yourself. I can imagine how hungry you are. The time is well past 12. Lexi, embarrassed, asked how much tea and cookies would cost. And the girl laughed merrily. What do you mean? Everything is free. Here is a vase, there are candies. They are, however, tiny but very tasty. Take them, don't be shy. Lexi modestly took a few pieces, and when she learned that the next day the results would be sent to her email, she thanked the kind girl who had been much more helpful to her than her mother-in-law and husband. Barely had Lexi come up for air when she got a call from Joshua. Tell me where to pull up. I'm free. Lexi gave the address and was soon driving with her husband toward his village. The tired woman didn't want to cause a scandal, so she offered him a candy bar as a gesture of goodwill. Try it. A girl from the receptionist's office gave it to me in the laboratory. The man, who was expecting to find out about the relationship, realized that the threat of a quarrel had passed and gladly ate the candy. But Tiana, as soon as Joshua and Lexi crossed the threshold of the house, began to throw thunder and lightning. Son, that's just outrageous, Tiana exclaimed. All right, you're off to help Didget. It's the right thing to do, not to leave a relative in need. But after you, this one went off to the middle of nowhere. Lexi tried to defend herself with indignation. Actually, I told you and Joshua that I was going to the district hospital. By the way, I'm concerned about your grandson's health, Tiana. The doctor said that the test should be taken, and that swelling like I have is not normal. The old woman grinned. These doctors just want to get more money out of you. And it is still unknown whose baby is being carried. Probably slept with half the staff at the boarding house. And you're trying to fool your Joshua? You think your mom pulled that stunt? You think it's going to work for you? Tiana twisted the shape from her fingers and held it up to Lexi's face. I'm not Janie Swan, I won't stand for it. After this rant, she sat back in her chair, placed her palm on the left side of her chest, and turning to her son, stated, Joshua, get her out of my sight at once. If you found her under the fence, let her go there. That's where your whore of a woman belongs. You'll find a good woman. The sooner you get her out of your life, the better. Eugene was messing around with her mom. What's the result? She's lying in a cemetery, Janie Swan crying her eyes out. Too soft. She couldn't get her son back on her side in the first place, so she's left alone and unsupported in her old age. I don't want that for you or myself. Lexi's eyes darkened at her mother-in-law's words, and she tried not to faint, to the delight of her mother-in-law's gloating. The woman, slowly, leaning against the wall, began to move toward the bedroom. There were no tears, one solid fright caused by an unusual sensation. Her stomach felt strangely cramped, but Lexi knew with her female intuition that it wasn't from hunger. Carefully, trying not to make any sudden movements, she began to put things away. A few minutes later, Joe entered the room and began to coax. Lexi, what are you freaking out? It's not a big deal. Mom's overreacting. She doesn't really think that. Mom's sitting in the kitchen right now, worrying, taking heart drops. Lexi raised her head and looked at her husband. That's it, Joe. I've had enough of this family life. When I had to run away from home, I promised myself that I would never take abuse. But for some reason, I've broken that promise repeatedly to this day. But that's not even the worst part. I'm terribly hurt that you can never say a word in my defense. I was wrong to believe that I could be happy." Lexi had barely spoken those words when another painful spasm pierced her. In a muffled voice, the woman ordered, "Get dressed. I don't feel well. Take me to the hospital." Tiana, who, as it turned out, was not sitting in the kitchen, but was eavesdropping on the conversation between the couple, intervened. "Why are you helping your son? He just arrived from the district center, and again must take you somewhere. I won't let him go. By God, I won't let him go." Lexi, realizing that the bickering with her mother-in-law could be fatal, was already dialing the emergency number to call an ambulance. The 45 minutes it took for the paramedics to arrive were the longest of the woman's life. The pain would sometimes subside briefly, and then she would continue to gather her belongings. When her insides twisted like a tight spring again, she sat down in the computer chair, opened the back, and tried, despite the urge to curl up, to relax completely and breathe calmly and measuredly. Joshua went against his mother's wishes and volunteered to accompany his wife to the hospital. Tiana only managed to insist that her son ride in the ambulance instead of her own car. Upon waking up from the anesthesia, Lexi felt terribly thirsty and dizzy. Her vision gradually became clearer, but the woman looked around the room and saw empty beds in the corners, as if deepening gray shadows. Lexi blinked hard, and when she opened her eyes, she noted with satisfaction that they were gone. Gradually, the sounds returned as well. Lexi could hear someone pacing up and down the hallway, someone walking behind the wall, someone talking. Somewhere nearby, an elevator was making noise. Taking into account all sorts of devices that came into view, the specific odor of medicines and detergents, Lexi concluded that she was in a hospital. The assumption turned out to be correct. Soon a woman in a medical uniform entered, moistened Lexi's lips with a wet wipe, and greeted her. "Welcome back. How are you feeling?" "Nothing, just very dizzy," Lexi replied hoarsely. "My throat is also dry." "But that's normal. Anesthesia is a thing. What's your name? Do you remember?" "Lexi." "That's a great name. All right, Lexi, we're going to keep you here for a little while longer and get you back to your room. You're going to be under a doctor's care for a few days, and then home." "Excuse me, please, but what about my baby?" Lexi asked the most important question, but got a very evasive answer. "Lexi, I'm just an anesthesiologist. The doctor will tell you everything in detail, don't worry." Lexi nodded, which made her eyes blurry, and it was as if she fell into a viscous, unnatural dream. After waking up again, she felt much better, though perhaps she was even more thirsty. No sooner had the woman pressed the call button, unnoticed earlier, than a nurse with a gurney came to pick her up. "Well, my dear, let's slowly move here. I will take you to the ward now." Lexi was worried about the baby. As soon as the doctor approached her and began to ask questions about her well-being, the woman quietly asked, "How is my baby?" Lexi's downcast eyes made it all clear as some terms she didn't understand came through the water column. Toward the end of the explanation, the doctor spoke words of comfort. "The surgery was a success. You will definitely be able to become a mom after the recovery period. Of course, you rest now. In the evening in the treatment room for a shot, come by all means." The doctor left, fighting the urge to scream. Lexi looked at the nightstand by the bed and was pleased to see her bag. Reaching in, the woman pulled out her cell phone and dialed her husband's number. "Joe, listen to me and don't worry. Gather all my things, bring them to me at the hospital when I'm discharged. I'll let you know the date and time later. We'll stop by the registry office, file for divorce, and you can be completely free." The man tried to say something, but Lexi wouldn't listen to him. Running away from home, transferring to distance learning, and insulting her mother-in-law were now considered insignificant events compared to the loss of her child. Now Lexi decided to go back to the apartment where Stephen and his son had taken up residence and kick them out. Would Mom like it or not? They didn't want to do it the easy way, so they'll do it the right way. We still have to find out what crime Kieran committed to expose the bastard. But that's after the dizziness stops. Instead of a few days in the hospital, it was a week. But it gave Lexi time to think things through. Calls from her mother-in-law were dropped, not answered. And when Tiana tried to talk to her daughter-in-law from her son's cell phone, Lexi cut off her lamentations. You know what? You two go under the fence. And don't call me again. Joshua complied with everything Lexi asked and didn't even discourage the divorce. He just dropped the woman off at the train station. Lexi, don't hold it against me and Mom. She didn't mean for this to happen. It was an accident. The woman didn't say anything back and didn't even slam the car door, even though she wanted to. Lexi hadn't warned her mom about her return. As she walked in, she was surprised that no one was in the apartment. On the one hand, that was a relief, but on the other hand, it was almost 10 p.m. And surely Maggie had to be home with someone. The bedroom Lexi shared with her little sister was relatively tidy, considering the little girl who lived there. In the rest of the rooms, however, the woman noticed signs of what looked like hurried packing. Lexi headed for the kitchen, automatically looking in the refrigerator. Lexi was amazed that the fridge was almost empty and put the kettle on. Just then, Isabel's mom and Maggie walked into the apartment. "Oh, my daughter." Isabel was so happy. "I'm so glad to see you." Maggie grabbed her older sister by the legs and began to persuade her. "Don't go away again." Lexi crouched down to hug the girl and began to comfort her. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere else." Later, when Lexi read her little sister a book and the girl fell asleep, Isabel apologized to her daughter. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry you were right. Stephen and Kieran got involved with bad business. Now they're in remand. Kieran's old crime has also come to light." The two women sat in the kitchen for a long time, dropping tears into their tea. And then Lexi suggested, "Mom, let's sell this apartment and move somewhere else. There are too many unpleasant memories here." Isabel agreed. Soon Mom and her two daughters settled in a town 300 kilometers away from home. Lexi transferred to the local university. She also met a nice single neighbor at the front door. She didn't believe in lightning-fast love anymore and agreed to marry Jason only after a few years. Isabel, who had ruined the lives of so many loved ones by marrying Stephen, devoted herself fully to taking care of Maggie and the twins Lexi and her husband had.